What is up, everybody? Today, I'm going to be bringing you guys a tier list going over every single returning Pokemon in the Indigo disc and then ranking them on a tier list specifically for VGC. If you guys want to see me do this same tier list but with a singles mindset, leave a comment and let me know. And without further ado, let's get right on into this. And please, if I say something that you don't agree with, think about leaving a comment and letting me know why I ranked something too high or too low. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. That being said, Venusaur. Venusaur is a Pokemon that I think a lot of people are really excited. You know, there's a lot of starters coming back in the Indigo disc, but Venusaur has a lot of competition, specifically in VGC. It's going to be competing with other grass types like Rillaboom. It's going to be competing with other grass types like Amoonguss. You know, these Pokemon that are really, really good in like Reg D and Reg E, they're still going to be really good going into Reg F once the Indigo disc comes out. So that being said, does Venusaur really bring anything to the table that these guys don't? It doesn't get Fake Out or Grassy Glide like Rillaboom. It doesn't get Redirection or Spore like Amoonguss. Yes, it has Sleep Powder, but I would say that these two grass types are still probably going to be more popular. But let's talk about what Venusaur really brings to the table. Venusaur brings to the table its ability Chlorophyll. That's the thing that I think most people are probably going to be using Venusaur for. When it's sunny, it's going to double its speed. And its speed is actually just a little bit slow. Let's talk about some other Chlorophyll mons. Alright, let's see, let's type. Chlorophyll, whatever. Anyways, let's just plug in Lilligant, right? So Lilligant is going to be, yeah, there's that L right there. So Hisui and Lilligant is the mon that we're really going to be competing with. Chlorophyll, there we go. So these are all the mons that have Chlorophyll in the game, and if we sort them by speed, you see like Whimsicott has Chlorophyll, obviously is going to be using Prankster, but like Jumpluff's a really good Chlorophyll user that's probably better than Venusaur. Lilligant's another Chlorophyll user that's better than Venusaur. Even regular Lilligant it might even be better than Venusaur. Venusaur gets a dual stab from having like Grass and Poison, versus Lilligant has Fighting and Grass. Lilligant gets better tech moves though. They both get Sleep Powder. Lilligant gets things like After You, and you know, it gets, like I said, the same Sleep Powder. It gets things like it gets Encore. It gets things like Ice Spinner. So they get a bunch of the same moves, but I think Lilligant having a 105 base speed is going to make Lilligant just more viable than Venusaur in a lot of situations. And then one other thing about Venusaur here is that it has an 80 base speed. So when you, even in like a full speed set from like a +1 calc, I know that we're talking a little bit about like Sunny Day calcs going to like +2, but let's say you just had like a +1 calc for like an Icy Wind speed drop on your opponent or something like that, you're still actually not outspeeding what would be like a Flutter Mane, right? And I think that that's pretty important, noting that Venusaur is going to have to be timid to actually like have an impact. Like you wouldn't be able to outspeed like a Shempow or a Flutter Mane if you were at all using this thing. So that being said, I do think that Venusaur is probably not going to see as much play as people think. It probably will get one thing that Lilligant doesn't really get, and that's going to be Weather Ball. It's got Weather Ball in the past. So when you pair this with like a Torkoal in the Sun or like a Ninetales in the Sun, you can hit fire moves. It gets coverage like Earth Power as well. So it's not terrible, right? I would say it's probably like the second or third best Chlorophyll mon. But that being said, where would I put it? You know, I think a lot of people are thinking it's going to be a lot better than it probably is because they're thinking about using it like G-Max Venusaur had that big Vine Lash dot. Mega Venusaur had the great Thick Fat ability. That's not really the case here. I think that I would probably put it in the mid. It's kind of okay. It's definitely usable, but I think you'd be better off picking like the Rillaboom if you want like a more aggressive grass type, Amoonguss if you want a more defensive grass type, and a Hisui and Lilligant if you want a more aggressive Chlorophyll mon. But those are just my opinions. So up next is going to be Blastoise. And we will probably breaking down like common cores and common mons that they're comparable to, so you can kind of get an understanding of like where each of these mons are going to be slotting into roles that have already existed for these things. So that's just how I kind of do my tier list. But yeah, Blastoise, it gets a lot of really, really cool stuff. The abilities on Blastoise aren't too great. Torrent and Rain Dish are both kind of okay. Maybe use Rain Dish on Rain. Torrent's actually, the Torrents, the Overgrowths, and the Blazes, and like Swarm, they're actually really good abilities. People don't really use them that often, but they are pretty good. What sets Blastoise apart from other water types, right, is that it gets Fake Out, right? So if we were to compare Blastoise with like, let's just compare it with like a Swampert, if I can type. So we got like Swampert here. Let's see, what's other water types. So it's not a Swift Swim mon, it's not an aggressive mon, it's not an intimidating mon, it's not a Drizzle mon. Let's just compare it with like let's go like Samurai Hisui, another popular like base water type right now. Most mons Terra defensively into water, but they don't usually have like that many just standard water types. And obviously there's gonna be things like Urshifu, right? You got Urshifu Rapid Strike. You got things like Gastrodon. Those are other types of water types, but I think in just terms of like the base like water mons, they get like, you know, Icy Wind, maybe a little bit of like Muddy Water and stuff. What sets Blastoise apart is the fact that it gets Fake Out. It also gets Yawn. So I tend to see Blastoise as like a little bit more of like a mix between like a Swampert, which is more of just like a Yawn bot. They tend to go things like Yawn. They get access like Earth Power, Earthquake, Waterfall, flip turn, things like that. Very, very good at like slowing down the game and letting you do what you want to get done. And then Gastron's also like the same type of idea. They also get like the yawns and the recovers and things like that. So they're good at like stopping your opponent from just sweeping you. And again, Blastoise not having that Gmax dot or the Mega Evolution gaining Mega Launcher, it makes Blastoise, I would say it makes it like a bit harder to use than people probably remember. But Fake Out is still very good. I think Fake Out is very good. It does have a big weakness to all those grass types like Rillabooms and stuff, but it is actually pretty decent against things like Tornadus. You know, movesets like this are just great. You know, these plus like maybe if it does get Scald upon comeback, that's a great moveset. Maybe you might want to cut Scald for something like a little bit more aggressive, maybe like a Muddy Water, so you can still put things to sleep. Like that's a solid moveset on a Blastoise. It can be built with AV. It can be built with like a Mystic Water, Leftovers, all really, really solid stuff. You can even put Protect on it. Really, really decent mon. I would say Blastoise is going to be put in the good. I'd compare it a little bit to how people are running Empoleon right now. That's another mon that you could definitely have compared it to. So Empoleon right here. So if we were to compare these two, obviously they're both starters, so they both have like the same like base stat total. But like Blastoise has like 79 base HP, 78 speed is really nice. It's faster than Empoleon. It's weaker than Empoleon, but it's a lot bulkier. And being a solo water type, I'm not going to say it's better than Water Steel, but it's not giving you common weaknesses to fighting and ground, which are very, very common, especially going into this new format. So that being said, Blastoise will actually be usable, but I wouldn't say that it's like the mon that wins you the games. It's more of like a mon that kind of holds your team together. Think of it more as like a Water Rillaboom without that Priority Grassy Glider terrain. That's kind of how I would play it. Just a standard Fake Out user that's going to be pretty decent. Speaking about stuff that might not be pretty decent, we're going into Vileplume next. Vileplume is another mon, very similar to Venusaur, that gets Chlorophyll, right? So we got Vileplume right here. So you can see its abilities are going to be Chlorophyll and Effect Spore. I don't think it gets, does it get Rage Powder? No, it doesn't even get Rage Powder. It gets one weird move. I know it gets After You, and I know it gets Sleep Powder. And it gets weird moves like Moonlight and stuff like that. It's not going to be very good. If we take a look at like some of the other things that it gets, I think it does get like Encore. It's obviously built more as like a special attacker. It gets Strength Sap. It can get the dual stab of Poison and Grass just like Venusaur can, but it's so slow. Even with like a full speed, you know, plus nature, it's not outspeeding anything. Yes, it's bulkier than, you know, things like a Sui and Lilligant and other like Chlorophyll mons that want to use After You, but it just is not fast enough to actually still outspeed the things and use After You to enable the right teammates. So like Vileplume Torkoal, the last time that was ever used was back in 2020 in Sword and Shield, because it was the fastest Chlorophyll mon at the time that got After You. I don't think Lilligant was in the decks yet. So it's not that great. This is the perfect example of a Pokemon that's just going to be not great. There are definitely going to be better options, Venusaur being one of them. So take that into account. Tentacruel. How did we not have Tentacruel? I guess we had Toadscruel, but we didn't have Tentacruel. Tentacruel's actually like not unusable. It gets a couple really cool tools that I think a lot of people sleep on. So if you take a look at Tentacruel, it gets some good abilities. Rain Dish is viable. Liquid Ooze is debatable, but Clear Body is really good because it prevents it from getting its stats dropped, which means you can pair it with Bulldoze users. You can use things like a weakness policy, or you can just make it like a physical attacker and now be immune to things like Intimidate. Put things like Swords Dance on it, which has gotten in the past. It doesn't have the highest base attack, but it does have a base 100 speed, which means you're going to be able to outspeed Urshifus, potentially speed tie things like Chi-Yus. You're going to be able to outspeed a lot of different things. Tentacruel's best stat by far, obviously it has a higher base Spadef, but its best stat is probably the fact that it has that base 100 speed. So we're going to be able to outspeed like just a good amount of mons. There's so many mons, especially in this format, that are going to be stuck in like the 90s that it's really good outspeed. So let's just go take a look at some things. So outspeeding Hydreigon's great. Outspeeding Urshifu's great. Outspeeding things like all the Tapus that are going to be coming back. If they're ever going to be legal, that's going to be great. Not all the Tapus, but things like Tapu Lele. Outspeeding both Arcanine forms is great. Outspeeding Landorus is great. You're starting to see that there is a viability for Tentacruel. It does get access to like Liquidation. Let's see, like Liquidation. I don't know why it's not showing it. Oh, does it not get Liquidation? I know it gets Waterfall. This is the Nat Dex thing. I'm also just going to say, when you guys are seeing this, I'm probably going to be on my way out to San Antonio Regionals. So that's why we're not doing any like rental codes or any cool things for this first week. I'm going to be flying out to compete in the very first regional of well, I guess it's not the first regional this season, but it's like the first one for me. So it's the first big regional this season, and it's happening the same weekend the DLC is coming out. So if you guys at all want to see that, think about tuning in. It's probably on the official Pokemon Twitch or YouTube channels. But yeah, I think Tentacruel is really good, but I definitely would say it's going to be more viable as like this aggressive Mon with like Poison Jab, Waterfalls, maybe like a different like Terra Blast, or like maybe some other sort of weird move, but something else. Like you can even put like Protector. This set like right here has done well at events before. It's top cut mid-season. I think it's one mid-season. It's done well in Premier Challenges. This is how I would probably run Tentacruel, with probably something like, you know, a Life Orb or something else. That being said, it's probably just a mid-mon. I don't think it's not great. I don't think it's actually good or meta-defining. But that being said, Tentacruel is, you know, it gets a good speed stat. It has a good defensive typing. It might end up seeing play depending on like what the rest of the meta shapes out to be. So going into the rest of the Kanto Mons, we have Dodrio. Dodrio's a bit of a weird one, right? I don't really think that there's that much of a reason to run Dodrio over like other options that we have. So like Runaway, Early Bird, Tangle Feet, this thing, the perfect example, no competitive use. This thing, like if we're to compare it to anything, it has a pretty decent speed stat of 110. That's a good number. 110 attack is also very nice, but it doesn't have any abilities that stop it from getting intimidated. It's only good attack stat. I mean, I'd compare this thing to something like a Staraptor, right? Let's see if we can type this out. So let's compare it to like Staraptor, which also doesn't really see play. You know, they have 100 and 120 versus like 2 110s, but then Staraptor comes built with like things like Intimidate. I don't even know if Dodrio even gets like Tailwind. Yeah, it doesn't even get Tailwind. It gets things like Taunt. It gets things like Jump Kick. Not High Jump Kick, mind you, but just Jump Kick, and then things like Drill Peck. It's okay. It's just one of those mons that I feel is been power crept so hard. Apparently, it's gotten Haze in previous generations. That's kind of cool, but I don't think that like Dozo is going to be super big in this format. So that being said, I think Dodrio is like okay, but it's another perfect example of like just not great mons. The power creep is so out of control that even if you have like that 110 base speed, which is a good number, I feel like there'd be no real reason to run that over a plethora of other bird Pokemon, a plethora of other like Tailwind setters. And if you were to run a Dodrio, I think that the best set would probably be Sashed, and you would still have to go Jolly, which means you're not really going to get the KOs that you would need. I'd compare it to something also like a Kanto Persian, which can be roughly the same speed tier, still pack that Taunt, still pack those big stab normal moves, but then like Kanto Persian gets like Fake Out and stuff like that, and other good support moves. So it's just another Pokemon you might want to think about using instead. Dewgong, though, might actually see competitive play. It's seen competitive play in the past. I don't think anyone's won a regional with Dewgong, but I know there's been multiple top 8s with it. So Dewgong gets some really cool abilities and moves. So Dewgong gets Thick Fat, Hydration, and Ice Body. Most people go with Thick Fat, being able to cut the damage from like Ice and Fire attacks, and it's going to be even better with Terra. You know, your items can be anything like a Leftovers or a Citrus, or sometimes people even go like Eject Button, just to be able to potentially pivot with this guy. The cool thing that Dewgong gets is Perish Song, and it's a really, really good mon that's important for Perish Trap teams, because it gets Perish Song, but it also gets Fake Out. And I think this is the only mon that gets both of these moves. So you can either lead with the Dewgong and like another mon, like a Trapper, like a Gothitelle, and you don't know which one of them is going to fake out, or which, you know, you don't really know what's going on, but like the Gothitelle can fake out the things that check the Dewgong sets the Perish. Next turn, like pivot around, you bring Dewgong back out in the mid game, Fake Out on their last turn of, you know, being alive when your Gothitelle is still in there, and then both their mons faint, and then you just re-Perish Song the last two. So it actually speeds up how Perish needs to get played. It has pretty decent bulk too. Like Dewgong is not a bad mon. Very, very bulky. Thick Fat makes it solid, and I think this thing will see play. I wonder if it's going to get it. There's no way for us to really know yet. But like Flip Turn would make this Pokemon like actually really, really good. And then like it's not gotten yawn in the past, but there's like a couple other weird moves. Sometimes people run Encore on it. Sometimes people run like Ice Shard or Icy Wind. But that being said, like stuff like this could be like really, really good. Obviously, you'd want Protect. This would on a Perish Trap team, but like this set right here, this would see competitive play. This would be like regionals level tech. But it's so situational. You have to run it on exclusively Perish Trap. So that being said, where would I put Dewgong? Honestly, it should go in the mid, because like that's the only thing it can do. But I'll put it up here. I do respect Dewgong. I think it's actually like a really, really cool mon. And like I said, I don't think there's anything else that can really get Perish Song and Fake Out. Maybe feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, that's kind of just how it goes. We're going up into Exeggutor. Exeggutor, very similar to a lot of these other mons. They get the chlorophyll, right? So you can see there's also a Alolan Exeggutor as well. We'll talk about that guy in a little bit, but Exeggutor falls prey to the exact same things that Vileplume does, in that it's a Chlorophyll Mon, and that's probably its best ability, and it's just so slow. It just doesn't outspeed anything. So that being said, yeah, it gets a great special attack. I actually like the Psychic Grass. It still gets access to like Sleep Powder. It doesn't get access to the After You, and if you want to use Sleep Powder on Exeggutor, you actually have to get it while you're in Execute and then Leaf Stone. You can't like move relearn it, as far as that's how it used to be in past gens. You can't move relearn it when you are when you've already evolved into Exeggutor. So I think that like it gets Sleep Powder, it gets Psychic. It'd be cool if it maybe gets Expanding Force back. That was one niche that Exeggutor had, is that like it had access to like Expanding Force plus like Grass coverage and like Protect and Sleep Powder. It was actually kind of cool. And what I do like about Exeggutor is that it gets like Trick Room. So on like Sunroom teams, there might be some way that you can make this guy work. Another thing that you can also just do with Exeggutor is play Harvest, which is a great way to play it on like a Trick Room setter and make it into like a pseudo Trevenant. So that being said, I think Exeggutor does get a lot of cool tools that make it different from the other like After You Chlorophyll setters. It's just a little bit more diverse, and if it does happen to get something like Expanding Force back from that being like a TM, this would be very, very good for this Pokemon. So that being said, where would I put it? I'm going to put it in the mid. I don't necessarily think it's good level, because I think that the meta is going to be so like power crept with like other legendaries coming back, plus things like, you know, Fluttermanes and Urshifu's and Tornstill running around. It's not going to be amazing. The best I would describe it as is like an already terrestrialized grass Armarouge. So if you have like Armarouge and Exeggutor on the same team, that might actually be really good, because there are double ups so that like if you're using like a Citrus Harvest Exeggutor, you're not going to get doubled up onto the same way that like an Armarouge would, and you're going to have a lot more defensive options and then still be able to fire off those huge Expanding Forces. But who knows? I think that Exeggutor is definitely like a cool mon, and it's one that I'm definitely looking forward to using. So let's see, we got the Hitmonlees. Give me just 1 second here. All right, 1 second here. All right, so Hitmonlee is a pretty good mon. I think Hitmonlee is going to be pretty usable. It can only really do one thing though. Let's plug in Hitmonlee. So Hitmonlee right here, you can see all the Hitmons right here. They get various abilities. Hitmonlee gets Limber, Reckless, and Unburden. So Unburden's probably going to be the best ability for Hitmonlee, being able to double its speed if it uses a held item. And the item that most people like to use is Normal Gem. Sure, you can go like Weakness Policy and Side Proc, but I think Normal Gem is really good when you pair it with Fake Out. So you Fake Out something, you do decent damage with the Normal Gem boosted Fake Out, and then from there your speed's doubled with Unburden, and 87 base speed is actually usable. It still sucks that it's slower than things like Landorus. It sucks that it's slower than, you know, a lot of different things. So then when you double your Unburden, if they just like set Tailwind, you're fine, or you're not fine, you're still losing. But that being said, this is like the best that this guy really does. He doesn't have like that much coverage. It's actually just a lot of fighting moves. Yeah, it gets access to things like Earthquake and like Rock Slide. But like it's just a lot of fighting moves. You'd have to probably throw an aggressive Terra on this guy to actually be able to hit be able to hit a lot of things. So that being said, where would I put Hitmonlee? It's more of a meme mon. I think it's cool. I don't think it's mid-level, though. I think it's probably not great. It's cool. It's cool. I would say Hitmonlee was one of those mons that I felt was a lot better in Dynamax format, because after you got that speed boost from your Unburden on your Fake Out, then if you Dynamaxed it and started like stacking, you know, Max Quakes and things, it made Hitmonlee a little bit more of a bully. But in this situation, like, you double your speed and then they're like, cool, what are you going to do, Rock Slide? Like, we already have things like Sneasler that do a much better job of doing that. We already have things like there's going to be so many other good fighting types, like the other Hitmons, I would say are much better than Hitmonlee. So let's take a look at Hitmonchan and talk a little bit about like why Hitmonchan might be better than Hitmonlee. Hitmonchan right here. So Hitmonchan gets Inner Focus, which means it can't be flinched or intimidated, which is a much better ability. Also, Iron Fist is viable, but the cool thing about Hitmonchan, right, is it gets Fake Out, right? So like Hitmonchan just gets really, really solid coverage, gets access to like Drain Punch, Bulk Up. Is Hitmonchan gonna like be meta defining, meta breaking? It gets weird things like Ice Punch and other coverage moves. You can still throw like Iron Fist on it if you wanted to. Is Hitmonchan going to be breaking the meta? No, but it is going to be like usable. I would say let's compare it to some other popular Fake Out users and talk about like how Hitmonchan kind of slots in. I think the number one Fake Out user you want to compare it to is things like Incineroar, which is probably going to be the best Fake Out user in the format. Hitmonchan is immune to that Intimidate, immune to the Fake Out, and has a super effective Drain Punch back into the Incineroar. That's great. That's good for Hitmonchan. Other Fake Out users are going to be things like Iron Hands. And Iron Hands, if we put Bulk Up on ourselves, we can actually like outvalue. You know, if we want to make our set something like, you know, something like this, you know, we can fake out. We have a faster speed tier. We can bulk up to be able to mitigate some of that damage. Like Hitmonchan is respectable on the SpDef side. Decent attack stat, decent speed stat. It's not terrible. Then there's also things like, you know, we're going to go into like other better users instead of Hitmonchan. Things like Hitmontop are just going to be like Hitmonchan better because they're roughly the same moveset, same idea of base stats like heavy attack, heavy SpDef, but this one gets packed with Intimidate. Other ones that are also coming back are things like Scrafty. So I think that like Hitmonchan's usable, but there are better options being Incineroar, Hitmontop, Scrafty. Intimidate's going to be a much better ability. You still get the fake out, but these guys have like the right stats in the right spots, and then they can just bully the Hitmonchan out as well. So Hitmonchan, it kind of leaves its teammate a little bit high and dry. Yeah, it does fake out, but it's trying to carry a little bit too much at like a not so great speed tier. That being said, I do think it's mid. I do think Hitmonchan is a relatively underutilized fake out user. People don't always see it coming, and I do think that Hitmonchan also gets weird things like it gets like Quick Guard, it gets Earthquake, Bullet Punch. There are things that Hitmonchan can do, but also, like, for the most part, most of these other guys can do the same thing. Hitmontop is Wide Guard, which is arguably better. So, that being said, I think Hitmonchan's cool, it's fun, but it's not going to be, like, meta-defining in any way. Man, we haven't really gotten any good mons yet. You know, it's going to be a pattern going into this. I think a lot of the mons that we're actually going to see do well in this format are going to be the exact same ones that we saw in Reg E and Reg D. I think it's still going to be a lot of Torn, it's still going to be a lot of Urshi, it's still going to be a lot of Flutters and a lot of that stuff. And that's unfortunate, but that's just kind of how it goes. So Lapras, you know, Lapras was one of those mons that was pretty decent back in Sword and Shield with G-Max, being able to like set the resonance and go for like an Aurora Veil. It doesn't have that right now. So Lapras is going to be not too hot. Yeah, it gets Water Absorb, which is cool. Shell Armor's a great ability. These two things check Urshi pretty hard, but the thing is like Lapras just doesn't really have the best stuff, and it loses hard to Iron Hands. Like, ugh. And Iron Hands is still going to be everywhere. Also, Incineroar is still pretty good against it. It's a water type, and because it's a water ice, it doesn't get access to Scald like a lot of the other water types are in the format. So that's also another thing going bad for it. It's weak to Rillaboom. It's not great into Incineroar, and it just doesn't really have like anything really going for it. There's much better ice mons to use, like a Abomasnow and Ninetales, even Iron Bundle. Like, why would you ever use a Lapras over Iron Bundle? That being said, it gets Perish Song. But I don't see that being a reason to use this. Like we already talked about, Dewgong gets those same options, but has like Fake Out and like Pivot moves. So that being said, I would probably put Lapras in the not great tier. The only set that you're probably going to see anyone even think about maybe using on competitive is going to be like an Assault Vest set with like an Ice Shard, maybe a couple coverage moves, maybe like an Oko move like a Sheer Cold or a Horn Drill. That's probably the only thing I would think that we're probably going to see. And again, I don't think that's very competitive. So it's one of those sets that like asks for permission to like, don't kill me and I'll try and like trade with you. And that's not really good. You're just going to get your face rolled over by like Fluttermanes, Chi-Yus, Shenpaos, all those things. Like Lapras is just way too reactive in this format without the G-Max option. Meganium is another Pokemon that I think is one of my favorites. Chikorita is my favorite starter, right? But Meganium doesn't really get that many tools. Meganium gets Overgrow and Leaf Guard, which again, Overgrow's cool, not really on a Meganium. Leaf Guard's cool. It's not really important here. I think the best thing that Meganium really does get is like dual screens. I don't know what else they're gonna give it. I'm not also saying like you need to buff Meganium. Obviously that'd be cool, but like I'm not expecting big buffs in any sort of situation. So like dual screens are cool. Dragon Tail's cool. Leech Seed, you know, it's synthesis. It's kind of just okay. I don't see a reason to really run this over like an Amoonguss or a Rillaboom, or maybe even like I'd rather run like a Chestnut than this thing as well. And again, this is my favorite starter's final evolution. So like I want this thing to be good. It's just one of those situations where like it just doesn't really get enough. Its stats are too spread. It has like great defenses, right? 100, 100 are great, but it's not the base HP just isn't really there. I think when I run Meganium, I play it kind of like this. And then I put like a tech move that deals like some damage here. I've used Body Slam here in the past, just to be able to go for like some potential paras. I know that people have won like mid-season's Premier Challenge with Meganium because it's a solid mon. You just put like a Light Clay here. And you just go for a big screen. So against like Psy Spam and other like Tricker matchups, you usually get those fat screens and you put up seeds and not die. It might even be good with Terra. But I think it's dedicating a lot of resources to a mon that's just actually not great. That being said, I plan on using a ton of Meganium. I like this Pokemon. But it's definitely in the not great category. I'm sorry. Like, I love this mon. I love it. But it has to try so hard. And I just don't see a situation where, like, it's going to be good in a format where someone could just be like, Herp Derp Flutter. And, like, Meganium can't even do anything about that. You're just going to get double tapped by D-Gloom every single game. Feraligatr, though, I think might. Oh, it sucks. It sucks, but we're going to talk about it. It might be able to do something. All right, so Feraligatr here, right? Torrent is not great. Sheer Force is going to be the ability you want here, being able to give you a 1.3 and nullify the secondary effects. Now, that means that if you were to use something like Waterfall, or let's just plug in Liquidate, right? Because Liquidate's just better. See that 20% chance to lower your target's defense by 1? Sheer Force ignores that, but then gives you a 1.3 damage boost on top of it, because that is a secondary effect over in the defense. That also works when you have an item like a Life Orb. The effect of the Life Orb gives you 1.3. The secondary effect of the Life Orb is it takes your health away. So you actually get the 1.3, but you don't take the health damage, which is really nice. Let's just also talk a little bit about like let's talk about like superpower. So you see, a lot of people think that like superpower would be able to be ignored by sheer force, and that's just not the case, because it's actually the main effect of superpower that lowers your own stats. So you'd normally see things like you'd see things like this. Like Ice Fang gets the boost, Liquidation gets the boost. You go like Protect over here, and then like Dragon Dance or something. That's kind of how most people play Feraligatr. The issue is that it's 78 base speed. We already talked about how Venusaur can't really function without being like a timid nature or a plus B boosting nature. I feel like Feraligatr is like the same way. You'd have to basically just be like full 252, cruise control for cool all the way. Obviously these things get set to 50. And then you see like, if you're playing like a Life Orb guy that's like 252 full speed timid, jolly, and this is like your set, it's like you are one-shottable. You're weak to Fake Out, you lose to Redirection, you get hit by E-Speed, Grassy Glide, everything. Ogre Pond just absolutely ends your life, and so this Pokemon just like really hard to use. It can be usable, but like why would you ever want to use something like this as opposed to like a multi-scale Dragon Dance Dragonite? I just don't see a reason to do it. Dragon Dance's also faster. It's a cool mon. It can be used. We just listed the situation in which it works. I'm going to put it in the mid category because, like I said, this Pokemon can do things. Bulky water types are good because they force your opponent to bring mons to check them. Otherwise, water types just have such good defensive typing. They're going to be able to wall a lot of things. It's probably decent into Shempal, but like honestly, you might just get OHKO by like Sucker Punch, which is not good. So I think Feraligatr is just going to kind of be mid. Lanturn, though, I actually really like Lanturn. I think it's going to be even better now that Terrastallize is an option. So when looking at Lanturn, right, the number one Pokemon that I like to compare this to, I've been playing Pokemon for a long time. I've been playing competitively since like 2005. I used to write articles for a website called Maximum Impulse Gaming, and I wrote an article comparing like Lanturn in 2013, 2014 to like Rotom Wash, because like Rotom Wash is been a very, very popular Pokemon for a long time. It's gaining popularity currently in Scarlet and Violet, because it's a good check to Torrent Urshi. But like, let's compare what these two do, right? This gets Levitate. It's a water electric type, really, really good. Has great bulk. And it gets access to like Hydro Pump. It gets access to like Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, Will-O-Wisp. Really, really cool mon. That being said, Lanturn, same water electric type. But then you have like, instead of Levitate, you have like Volt Absorb and Water Absorb. And it forces you, on a ladder, it's a 50-50. Like, you don't know which one it's going to be. But in an open team sheet, they can see it. But that being said, Volt Absorb is a great ability. Water Absorb is a great ability. You can go in like a fire type and have Water Absorb, or you can go like a flying type and have like Volt Absorb. It's actually a really, really cool mon, and it has a humongous base HP with, not as great defenses, but you can put points into those, flesh those out. It's going to get access to Scald, which is going to not be as inaccurate as Hydro Pump. Obviously, the same thing goes for like, it gets Thunderbolts, a bunch of other cool stuff like that. It gets Dazzling Gleam, which is kind of weird. It gets a bunch of like really unique moves. It gets Ice Coverage, which Rotom doesn't get. It's got a bunch of different things over the years. I'm not saying it's better than Rotom. I'm saying they're very comparable, and if you are a fan of Rotom, but Rotom just doesn't really do it for you, you might want to actually just try a Lanturn. It's better than you think. It's bulkier than you think. And that being said, I'm gonna put Lanturn. It's still not great. It's not. I gotta be honest with you guys. These mons, they're so cool. I can talk about what I like about them all day, and I can say we can make these things work. But at the end of the day, the problem with these mons is they just cannot stand up to the sheer might of Paradox Pokemon. Paradox Pokemon just roll these guys over. Paradox Pokemons don't even really need their like Quark Drive and Photosynthesis. They're just stat sticks. Flutter Mane, Iron Hands, just roll things over. Same thing goes for the Ruin Mons. Yeah, those Ruin abilities are good, but those Mons are just stat sticks. They have the right speed, they have the right damage levels, and they just roll people over. They invalidate a lot of other Mons in the format. And that being said, there are going to be a lot more other legendaries that are coming back here too. Like, there's not really a reason to run a Lanturn when like a Suicune exists. Same thing goes for like Blastoise. Suicune is going to really take that bulky water spot from a lot of these mons. And I think Lanturn's really cool, but at the end of the day, I do think that it would just get rolled over by like well played, you know, people using like legendaries and stuff like that. Granbull though gets maybe a couple tools that a couple of these guys don't. So let's take a look at Granbull. Granbull. All right, so it gets Intimidate, right? That's the ability that you really want. The other two abilities are kind of okay. You can get a speed drop, but like it's fine. Intimidate's the ability you want. Normally these things get built with like an Assault Vest, and it has like a decent attack stat. 120 is pretty good. It's slow enough to be used in Trick Room, so this guy could fit onto like teams that want to like fight Iron Hands. So like for example, like let's take a look at Iron Hands here. If I can type here. And Iron Hands is still going to be everywhere, right? So Iron Hands has a 50 base speed. So you actually, if you go speed reduce 0 speed, you're going to underspeed Iron Hands in Trick Room. The issue is Iron Hands can just heavy slam the crap out of you because you're a fairy type. Even with Intimidate, you're still probably going to get two-shotted. So you might have to Terra away, but you can actually like maybe outvalue it with like Play Roughs and stuff like that because you're going to get an extra hit on it eventually. So you're going to go like Play Rough, soak some damage, Play Rough again. If you Terra it correctly, maybe you get one more turn. A third Play Rough, you might actually be able to take out the hands, and the fact that like you can Terastallize into a type that not only stop, like you maybe like Electric Terra could even work here. You stop the Heavy Slam and like the Thunder Punch into it, and they wouldn't be Drain Punching it because you're initially a fairy. It might be one of those weird mons that could see play like that. So that being said, I do think the one thing I wish this guy had was Fake Out. If he had Fake Out, this guy'd actually be like kind of nutty. It'd be like an almost weird Incineroar. But that being said, I'm going to put it in the mid. I'm going to put it in the mid category. Intimidate's good. It has a good speed tier being slower than Hands, actually, in Trick Room. And if you're just looking for a mon to like kind of slot in and mess around a little bit with, it gets a lot of really good coverage moves. So I'd think about trying it out. You know, the question of the day was, you know, first of all, feel free to let me know if you agree or disagree with any of these choices so far. But the other part of the question of the day was, do you like this list, and do you want to see me do the same type of list, ranking on these Pokemon and explaining what they do right and wrong in a singles situation? If you do want to see that, please let me know, and I will try my best to make the same tier list, but for singles, which it would look completely different, by the way. These Pokemon play completely differently in singles and doubles, and things like Fluttermane that are a lot more oppressive can be much more easily dealt with in singles because you could just have a Sash. And it's like, cool, well, yeah, you can one-shot me with Fluttermane, but then I one-shot you back, right? And so I feel like, you know, there are certain mons that would be a lot higher in this list. Like, for example, let's just see a look at what we have here so far. I think Blastoise is a lot better in singles. I think Tentacruel's way better in singles than it is in VGC. Things like Meganium and Lapras actually have like competitive viability as like a little bit stall mons. Like Lapras is a good anti-meta lead, checking like Landorus and stuff. Meganium would be a much better like leech seed slash like tempo slow downer, I guess. That's a weird way to phrase it. But yeah, I think these mons, the list will look completely different for singles. But that being said, Skarmory is next on our list, which is why I was talking about singles. Skarmory is obviously so much better in singles. I'm actually very excited for Skarmory to come back. It's obviously just a really good Pokemon in singles, but in VGC, it doesn't really get that much going for it. Skarmory, it gets Keen Eye and Sturdy. Sturdy is the ability you're probably going to want to use most with like lefties and other, you know, maybe even Covert Cloak might be the right way to play it in VGC. But it gets Tailwind, and it gets Taunt, and it gets like Drill Peck, and that's kind of about it. It's not that great. I would say that Corviknight has basically replaced this Pokemon in VGC. Corviknight's also kind of replaced it in singles as well. It gets things like Roost, other good stuff like that. But that being said, it doesn't really get that many other cool moves. I think the only good thing that it gets that something like Corviknight wouldn't get is Feint. So like Tailwind, Feint, you know, Drill Peck. That's kind of all this guy brings to the table with like Taunt. So something like this would probably be the set you wanted to use in VGC, sorry. In singles, it's like Rocks, Hazards, things like that. But in VGC, you probably got something like this, which isn't great. It's not. So that being said, the best I think that you got to put it in mid still, though, because like Tailwind's good, Feint's good, Steel Flying typing is good. It's more viable than a lot of these mons, but you could only really do one thing, and the thing that they do is just not great. So that's where I'm going to put it. A Pokemon that I'm really, really excited to see back is Kingdra. I think Kingdra is going to be viable. I think Kingdra's going to be viable. So let's talk about Swift Swim. So let's sort all the Swift Swim users, and let's sort them by speed tier. So you see, like, Barraskewda is really, really fast, but doesn't even really need the Swift Swim. A lot of people go Propeller Tail on it. Floatzel, yeah, it's fast, but it's weak, and even though it can do a lot of stuff, it actually doesn't have that great of coverage. You have to go for, like, a secondary Terra. Yes, they gave it Ice Spinner, but that's still not enough. Love Disc is not great. Lumineon is better off as a Storm Drain user. Poliwhirl and Poliwrath are surprisingly fast. Sorry, Poliwhirl and Poliwag are surprisingly fast, but they're not great. Golduck is a decent Swift Swim user, but it's very, very one-dimensional in terms of its offensive coverage. Yes, it gets good tech moves like Hypnosis and Encore, but like you can only use Water and Ice attacks. Kingdra is where things change. right? Kingdra is technically fast enough. Remember, Venusaur had that 80 base speed, which means even when you doubled it, it wasn't fast enough. You had to go with like a speed boost in nature, which means when you actually want to hit something, you wouldn't get the KOs. If we take a look at Kingdra over here, Kingdra has an 85 base speed. So that means when we want to go like 252 and have the Swift Swim double it, we're still faster, right? We're faster than anything. And if we have like the +1, we're still faster than most things that we would need. I would still say that Timid Kingdra is very good as well, though, or Jolly, whatever. If you want to go physical or special, they both have 95 on all their base stats, except for speed and HP. Because like Kingdra mirror matches happen, and you want to be able to outspeed their Kingdras. Kingdra can be built physical or special, like I was talking about. Let's plug in the Kingdra right here. You can be built physical or special. It gets access to like Hydro Pump, Ice Beam. It gets access to like Hurricanes and stuff like that, which still are actually viable in my opinion. But then also in like singles, it gets like Scale Shot, or not in singles, but like a physical one would get like Scale Shot. There are other options. It also does get Sniper, which is a valuable ability. It has gotten Focus Energy before. I wouldn't be surprised if it got it again with Sniper. So when it strikes with a critical hit, its damage multiplied by 1.5. I think Focus Energy is still in the game. I'm pretty sure it is. I know they've taken it away from some mods. I don't think that's because it's gone. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, I think that like Kingdra's great. Most people tend to go like Draco with it. They go Draco. You can go Hyper Beam. It's not Hyper Beam. Hydro Pump or Muddy Water. You can even get like Scald, Hurricane. Some people like to just throw like a Protect over here. Like standard Kingdra sets from like back in the day would just be like a Life Orb here. And you see like we have 3 different type coverages, which is like a full speed, full special attack Kingdra. It's a good mon. I think it's probably my favorite Swift Swim user. Really, really good mon. I think that I'm very excited. I like this more than something like Basculegion. I like this more than something like Dreadnought. Just it has the speed that those mons don't have. And so you can actually just bully things correctly. You can allow people to get up Tailwinds because the fact that you have your weather up means you're trading with them. Like you're still maintaining your speed. They're Tailwinding to meet you. And so that's where I think I'm going to put Kingdra in at Great. I think I'm going to put Kingdra as the first Great Pokemon, which would be like an A tier. And yeah, I think Kingdra is going to be a lot of fun to use. I don't think it's like OP. I don't think it's like busted, like meta defining, but it's like when you're playing Swift Swim and you're playing Rain, you should probably use a Kingdra. All right, now we're getting the meat and potatoes of everything. We have Porygon-Z. This Pokemon's actually like super, super good. Probably the best EV user ever made. And I've heard a lot of people say they don't really think Porygon-Z is going to be that good. He gets a lot of good abilities. Trace is good, Download's good, Analytic, they're all really good. It gets Trick Room, right? It's probably one of the better Trick Room setters because you can't really one-shot it. You always have to double up into a Porygon-Z. This thing can be like EV trained if used correctly and having the right teammates to like not even die to like big close combats that are stabbed from other mons. It's like a really, really good mon. And then when we're adding Terrastalize into it as well, being able to like change its type to be able to avoid like Prankster's taunts going dark or even be able to go Ghost to avoid like fake outs, this Pokemon's always going to get up Trick Room, right? So it's going to be so good. And then like it gets Download, which you can use to get a special attack or an attack boost, and then gets access to like Ice Beam and Thunderbolt. And then what makes it really good as well is it gets a big like recover and stuff like that. Like Tri-Attack's also a really, really good move on it. And remember, Eviolite is going to boost its defense and speed up by 1.5. This Pokemon was never supposed to get another evolution. This should just be like, this has like better stats than half the Pokemon on our tier list so far. So that being said, this Pokemon is nuts, and I feel that people aren't really ranking it as high as they should, just because they're like, like the Hands destroys it, and it's like, okay, but like Trick Room goes up, and then it like Hands loses to the other, like Hands loses to the Torkoal then, you know? I feel this is one of those situations where like, Porygon is one of those monster greats, so many 50-50s. Like if I were to lead a Porygon and a Flutter, you cannot stop both of them from doing something. You can't. There's not like a lead that will always stop both of them. You're either going to lose them onto the Flutter on a trade, or like maybe like a Porygon and a Shempow or something like that, or a Flutter, or like, you know what I mean, like an Urshifu and a Porygon. You can't stop both. You got to pick one. You got to pick the lesser of two evils. And Porygon is an OP mon. It's busted. It's so good. And you need Ubers to break this thing. If you don't have the Ubers, it's not going down. He'll just live. And then get the Trick Room, and all your hyper-aggressive, like, Whimsicott, Torn, Urshi teams, they'll just be like, oh, crap, I lose to Torkoal now. You know, I hate to be that guy, but, like, Porygon is going to be so good, and I think people are sleeping on it because, like, they think Incineroar and Hands are going to do things, and, like, Trick Room goes up. You know, and Porygon's teammates succeed hard. And then while their teammates are succeeding hard, forcing protects, forcing opponents to switch, Porygon's recovering to be able to reset the TR later on in the game. It's like Dusclops, but with less weaknesses and recovery options. And a ton of damage. It's so good. Such a good mon. I like Porygon a lot, and it's going to be everywhere. Speaking about everywhere, Smeargle is the next Pokemon we're going to be talking about. Now, Smeargle's a bit of a weird mon. Smeargle used to get a move called Dark Void, because it can get anything. Sketch makes it be able to use any move. Dark Void hits everything, and they've nerfed it to 50% accuracy, and I don't even think it can be used anymore on Smeargle. I don't even think you can use Dark Void. But it used to be like an 85 or like an 80 accuracy, and it would just double sleep both your opponent's mons, and it would suck. You can build it with like Sash, you could build it with like a Scarf, you could build it with so many different things, and they usually build it with Moody, and then weaved on like Spiky Shields to get like Moody for like speed boost. It's the most RNG stupid Pokemon. I don't know how we played with this thing for years. It can do anything. Open Team Sheet's probably going to solve it a lot more, but on like Ladder, you have to respect Fake Out, you have to respect Redirection, you have to respect Spiky Shield, you have to respect like Crafty Shield, Trick Room, Tailwind, Ally Switch, like the things this thing can do are literally spores and things like that. There's so many things you can do, and it has like a decent speed tier, so like you can't just bring like fat mons and try and like wall out or wait it out like you would do against other memes like a Zoroark or something, because it'll just spore you. So I think you gotta still put Smeargle up here because it can do all of those things. It can literally do anything. So like you can lead like Smeargle in like a Torn and go Fake Out Tailwind and then to spore something, and like because you're Sashed on one and Coworked on the other, like if you go Ghost Terror, they can't stop that. You're always gonna be able to get that value if you want it, if you want to be that guy. And then if you get that one Moody proc that gives you the stat boost that you need, whether that being like a speed stat or a Spadef or a defense boost, you might just be able to win the game. Or I don't think you can boost into evasiveness anymore, but that used to be a huge part of its game as well. Fish for as many evasiveness boosts as possible, and then just like follow me out the game. So Smeargle's a big problem, but I do think that it's still going to be everywhere, and it's really lame. I think Open Team Sheet though, like for regionals, it might be a lot easier to handle, but like, this Pokemon is just so dumb. Hitmontop. Hitmontop, we've already talked briefly about it, but like, it gets access to Intimidate. Hitmontop, a world champion, won in 2016 with Wolf Glick. Gets Fake Out, gets Intimidate. Those are the moves that are good. It gets access to Wide Guard, which I don't know how much AoE we're really going to see in this format. But that being said, it gets access to, like, I don't think it gets Drain Punch, right? Yeah, isn't that weird? Isn't that so weird? It has to use Close Combat. But this makes it a good check to Urshi Dark. And then from there, it gets access to, like, Bullet Punch. I think it gets, like, Feint and stuff like that. So it's a decent mon. I think it's like an off-meta pick to, like, Incin. I think you either pick like Hitmontop, Hands, or Incin. Those are your three big Fake Out users you're going to be seeing in this format. That being said, I think Hitmontop's a good mon. I would definitely put Hitmontop at least in the good category. It's definitely going to be like usable. I don't think it's good enough to be great though. I could be wrong. This is one of those things like I don't see Hitmontop honestly replacing Iron Hands. Because I feel like if you want an Intimidate Fake Out user, you're going to use Incin. And if you want a Fake Out user that can deal damage, you'll use Iron Hands. And if you want both, you will use both, Iron Hands and Incineroar. I'm not seeing a situation in which like Hitmontop wants to like fit in and be like Hitmontop Incin or Hitmontop Hands. That doesn't really make as much sense as like Iron Hands and Incin, in my personal opinion. One value that Hitmontop has over Iron Hands in some situations is that it's not ground weak. So like you could pair it with Incin and not have two ground weaknesses, but then at the same time it's like adding it's adding like a flying weakness, which who knows, that might end up being really, really good in this format depending on how the meta turns out. If there's a lot more mons that are going to be weak to ground like Incineroar, we might end up seeing a lot more flyers to come in and save those Incineroars as pivots, which means we might just see a lot more flying moves in general. It's hard to say, but I do think that Hitmontop would be... again, these also aren't ranked in their respective tiers. I think Hitmontop's at least a good tier. Good Fake Out. It's better than, obviously, Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan. You see how they're basically all the kind of same, except for, like, they get, like, one tier up each time. Maybe if Hitmontop gets an evolution, it'll be good. Be great. So let's talk about some legendaries. So these are some legendaries that will actually be legal. The legendary trio from Soul Silver and Heart Gold, and just Silver and Gold, I guess. Raikou a cool mon. It sees play every once in a while. But, like, Raikou sees play in a weird way. They get pressure, inner focus are going to be the abilities for all three of these that you're going to see. Being able to block those Fake Outs, very, very important. Raikou has a great base speed and a good special attack stat. And in previous formats, they'd see it on, like, Weather Ball, and you get access to, like, Thunderbolt, which is cool. It also got Scald, like, last gen, which is actually, like, or 2 gens ago, I guess. Really, really cool move. But then, like, the move that I think makes Raikou really nice is just Snarl. It's a decent Snarl mon on, like, an Assault Vest set. So it's like that tech AV mon that's like just a little bit chonky, so you can't one-shot it, but if you stick the Snarl, I think this thing's going to go very well with like Sinistcha, being able to like restore health And then this thing pins the mons that are good against Sinistcha. Sinistcha restores its health with Hospitality and things like that. I think Raikou is going to be okay. Raikou. I'm just going to put it in good for now. I think that Raikou is just a solid mon you can use on a lot of teams. Its biggest fault is that it does have that ground weakness. Yes, it does have Scald to be able to combat that, but you do not stab Scald, which means if you want to not die to those things, you're going to be using your Terra. Makes it a little bit of a Terra hog. That being said, I still think it's okay. Entei is going to be really cool, though. Entei gets some cool moves. Entei, again, is immune to that Intimidate because it has Inner Focus. It gets Sacred Fire, which is like the best move ever. 50% chance to burn. It's like super amazing. It gets access to extreme speed. This is going to be one that's really going to greatly benefit from like an offensive Terra because like Entei's kind of been stuck in like it can only really do these. Being able to like hit for like any other type ever, being able to like hit a Heatran, that's like Entei's wildest dream. You know, yeah, I get Stomp and Tantrum, you know what I mean. But being able to hit for like something else could be really, really nice for Entei. It gets things like Stone Edge, gets things like Stomp and Tantrum is not great. But like Entei kind of just wants like one more attack maybe. Being able to hit like other fire types could be really, really nice too. So I think Entei is going to see play. It also does still get that Snarl if you want to be like that guy and play like that bulky, like vested Entei with like maybe one more coverage move. I think it's a really, really solid mon. So that being said, I'm actually going to put Entei in great. I personally, this is my personal opinion here, I like Entei more than Incineroar. It has less weaknesses. It doesn't have that weakness to fighting. It has a much faster base speed tier at 100, and it can still do the things that you want Incineroar to do. Sacred Fire kind of works as a pseudo-intimidate. If you stick the Sacred Fire on something, it also helps play around like competitive and defiant procs. From there, E-Speed's nice, Snarl's nice, and then like having the ability to like Terra Blast or have like just an additional coverage move, or even just like a Protect with like a Lefties or a Citrus Berry here. It's really, really solid mon, so I would put Entei high. Well, higher, like great. I don't think it's amazing. I know I am very comfortable with this Pokemon. I like using it in a lot of events. It's also just a cool mon, so I'd put Entei kind of high. Let's move on to Suicune. I think Suicune's going to be great. Great. Very, very good mon. Let's just talk a little bit about Tailwind. So let's talk a little bit about Tailwind, the move. And you can see, let's just like sort what gets Tailwind. You're going to see a pattern, right? The pattern is that everything that uses Tailwind is a flying type. Not everything, but like they all take big damage. Kartana's not in the game yet, right? They all take big rocks damage, right? They all take big damage from Rock Slide. Obviously, exceptions to that rule are going to be things like Whimsicott, which is going to be amazing, right? So that being said, like having a mon that can set Tailwind and do a bunch of other really cool things that doesn't have to take super effective damage from like Rock Slide, it's really, really good. It makes you like a different level of like Tailwind setter. So Suicune's going to be really, really cool. It's also immune to Fake Out because it gets Inner Focus, so you can go things like Tailwind. You can have additional support of Speed Control and like Icy Wind as well. It gets things like Scald. And then like from there are just a bunch of other like viable moves you can do. Some people like Protect. Some people like to use Ice Beam instead of Icy Wind. Some people like to just throw like a screen on there or a Calm Mind. Some people like to put Roar to be able to phase things out. It's just a good mon. Some people put Bulldoze there in the past. I like Snarl here when I play it. So you have like Speed Control, Burn, Snarl. Very, very solid mon. Good speed tier, great bulk, really, really solid. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to put Suicune up here in OP, because I feel like Suicune, very similar, demands a lot of respect, and like I said, I still think we're going to see a lot of Torn. We're still going to see a lot of Urshi, and Torn Urshi cannot fight Suicune. You have to weed the right stuff. Suicune's going to have a hard time dealing with Hands, but if you ever stick that Scald, Hands is just a wet noodle, and he's eventually just going to fall down. So I think that Suicune's going to be great. I think Suicune's going to be really, really good. It's also a great mon to check Heatran. Like, it's so good. Like, I feel like once you get the full Heatran Crest Suicune game, and you can just have that meta with, like, a Moongus, like, oh, dude, I'm so excited. It's not even Stall, it's just, like, chunk. Like, those four, plus, like, an Incineroar and, like, a Flutter, it's going to be a really, really cool team, and I know it's going to do well. So, Suicune's going to be really good as, like, it's probably one of, if only the... It's probably, like, Corviknight and Suicune are probably two of the only manual Tailwind setters, like, not Prankster or Gale Wings boosted Tailwind setters that I would say are, like, competitive and good enough to be used at, like, a tournament level. And one of the things that makes them really good is that they don't take rocks damage for super effective. That's a really important part of it. Sceptile's cool, but if you're not using Mega Sceptile, it does fall a little bit short. I've top cut regionals with Sceptile, Mega Sceptile, top cut multiple events. I've won multiple events with Mega Sceptile. But regular Sceptile, the best thing it gets is Unburden, which means you kind of have to use it on like a weird Seeds team with like a Tapu or something like that, or you can just go Sash. it's okay. It gets access to like setup moves, Leaf Blade, it can be both physical or special. It's just kind of not great. It's a little bit too aggressive. It's very weak to like Intimidate, which means you kind of have to run it special, and it doesn't really have enough special attack to actually do anything. So while I love Sceptile, while we'll still try and feature Sceptile a little bit, it's one of those mons that's similar to Hitmonlee. It was much better in Dynamax format. So I would probably just put Sceptile. Honestly, it's in the not great category. It's too much of a glass cannon, and even with like Seeds boost, you have to commit so much to even using this guy in your team and like have a combo based team around enabling it, and it just doesn't really do anything. It loses to screens, it loses the fake outs, it loses the redirections. It's just probably not the best mon. Blaziken though does get a few tools that are worth talking about. So let's talk about Blaziken. So Blaziken's gonna be right here. It gets Blaze, which we already talked about being okay, but Speed Boost is what you really want to use on Blaziken, and it's an 80 base speed, but you can play around that because it can boost its own speed, right? So Blaziken's really good. I usually think this thing gets built best with Sash. You want to go Detect over Protect a lot of the times to be able to weave in and get those speed boosts. And then like from there, it gets a bunch of like really cool moves. It gets Blaze Kick. It gets, Blaze Kick's actually going to be good on this guy because it's going to make it so you don't have to take recoil from a Flare Blitz, which means you can still use your Sash. It gets access to close combat now, so you can do that without breaking your Sash. And then from there, a bunch of other like decent moves. It gets Brave Bird if you wanted to break Sash. It gets access to like Helping Hand, Poison Jab. Some people like to use Rock Slide or Swords Dance in this guy. It also gets access to like Counter, Will-O-Wisp, U-Turn, things like that. It's a decent mon. It's decent. It's not like meta-defining breaking, but it's decent. You can also just throw like a weird, like sometimes people like to run their Blazikens like, they go Swords Dance, and they have like Close Combat. They have like one move that's coverage here, and they'll have like Baton Pass here. And so you'll be able to like Baton Pass off with Swords Dance like something else that's like really, really big. So I think Blaziken is like a usable mon on a lot of teams. So it's much better than not great, but I don't know if it's good enough to be good. I don't see a reason to really run a Blaziken over Incineroar because again, you're going to be welcoming the Intimidate. Maybe like a clear Amulet Blaziken, but then you're not sashed, and you have to like waste a Terra to play around Fake Out and see how much resources that takes just to like play the game at like a decent level. I'd say Blaziken goes in the mid. Again, this thing was just hard to Urshi. Paradox mons are going to give it big problems. Even at that +1, you still need to like have like a jolly boosting nature, which means you actually can't even KO like a lot of other chonky mons. And it's just going to probably be just really hard to use. That being said, it's really cool, and there are tech things that Blaziken can do that nothing else can do. But I think we're going into a format with so many mons that it's just going to be really hard to use Blaziken competitively. In a VGC format, in singles, Blaziken is much better. Swampert. Swampert's very good. We talked about Blastoise. I think Swampert actually does a lot more things better than Blastoise. So we go to Swampert here. So it gets access. So let's just talk about Blastoise, right? Blastoise is cool again. It gets Fake Out, right? Fake Out's good. Fake Out's a good move. It has a 78 speed. Swampert is 60, so a little bit slower. Not bad. But Swampert has like 100 base HP, 90. That's great. Like 79 versus 100, 105. I'd rather have this and like get that big fat HP stat, pair it with like Intimidates and Screens, be much better. It can be both physical or special. That's one of the cool things about Swampert. 110's good. 85's also good. It gets really good moves. The cool thing about Swampert is it gets ground coverage. So you can throw like Earth Power on this guy, or you can go Earthquake or any other sort of like ground moves you want, and be able to pin those Incineroars and still play around like, Storm Drain and things like that. But that being said, this guy gets things like Protect. They get things like Yawn. It's probably one of the better Yawn users in the format. And then from there, like I build mine with like this. This is the set that I like. It also gets access to like Wide Guard and other like really cool moves like this. So it's like an in-between like Suicune, Blastoise, Gastrodon, all those little guys. And what sets Swampert above things like Blastoise specifically that's using Yawn is that it's a ground type. You can't hit it with electric moves. So yes, it's super 4 times weak to grass, but like you can see those moves coming, and you can now terrestrialize away from those moves. It's so good. So that being said, I'm going to put Swampert up here. I think Swampert's great. I think it's a really, really good mon. It's one of those mons that it's really hard to one-shot. It's really hard to just remove a Swampert from the game. And the fact that it only has weakness to grass makes it just like pretty nice. And same thing like Freeze Dry would also be 4 times super effective, but like you can see those things coming a mile away and play around them or terrestrialize away and just be in a good spot. I think Swampert's definitely going to see competitive play. We're going to rank Plusle and Minun together, just because they're not great. Plusle and Minun are cool. They get plus and minus. Now, they've changed how plus and minus have worked over the years. Basically, you used to have the opposing one to actually get the boost, but now it can be like this ability or the other one. So, for example, like you could have 2 Pokemon with plus or 2 Pokemon with minus and it would work. And so the only real way to really play these Mons in other formats was to pair it with like the respective other one, and that just didn't really work. They get entrainment, right? So you can use entrainment with these guys and give your teammate plus or minus and still have them both get the boost. The issue is like these guys, they're not that fast. Something like a Dedenne, which we've actually featured on the channel pretty recently. It just does that same thing with like entrainment and plus at like a much faster speed tier. 101 is fast, definitely fast enough. It's like the barrier for being fast enough outspeeding base 100s. Yeah, entrainment's like the only thing they really do. They don't even get like fake out. They get encore, but they're like half Pikachu clones. They don't get redirection. They get wish, but like that's not really that much. I would say they're cool and they're fun, but they're just not that great. There's so many other things that do their job better. And the issue with entrainment, using it on your teammate to give them plus, to give them the 1.5 boost from like maybe like a Scarf Dedenne or a Scarf Plus or a Scarf Minus. First of all, you're locked into that now. And then the other issue is like a lot of the mons you'd want to give that boost to would be something like a Flutter, and you can't entrainment to copy out the photosynthesis. Same thing as like a bundle. Those are 2 mons like Flutter and Bundle would be the 2 best targets for that, to give them like the plus 1/5 special attack boost, and you can't overwrite Quark Drive and photosynthesis. So like it just doesn't really work. Flygon. You know, on this channel I like Flygon in its appearance. I think it's cool. It's a cool looking bug dragon guy. That being said, this is the most overrated Pokemon ever. People have thought this Pokemon's been good for years. It's not. It's not good. We're going to plug in Flygon. Yeah, it gets Levitate, which is a great ability, especially on a mon that's not normally weak to those types, so you can like Terrastallize into like Electric and have no weaknesses Flygon. But like 100 base speed's okay. 100 base attack is not good. 80 base special attack is not good. This thing, in my opinion, like has to be built Sash or like Choice Itemed. And that being said, it just doesn't have enough damage to KO anything Choice Itemed. Even Scarfed, this thing still gets outsped by like a lot of weird things in the meta. It doesn't get access to Tailwind. It gets access to Dragon Dance now, but it's really, really one-dimensional. I think the best item that this thing can do is just you Sash it, and then the cool thing is that this is a mon that is not weak to ground, that you can put on a Sandstorm team and not have its Sash broken by Sandstorm. That's the one niche this guy can do. And then it gets like a pretty decent Earth Power, the stabbed Earth Power. That's about it. It gets Draco Meteor. It gets good coverage, like Draco Meteor, Fire Attacks, things like that. But Flygon just really, really has been hit hard by the power creep. And it's one of those really, really cool mons. We're going to put it in mid because of it has so many options. But all of them are not great. And if you're winning a game, it's not because you have a Flygon. Like, Flygon's there while your other teammates are doing it. Like, Flutter's doing all the work. Torn Urshifu doing all the work. You have a Flygon in the back, being able to swap into soap in that one electric attack. But it's not that busted. Metagross, man, I would love to put Metagross in OP, but I think Metagross is like public enemy #1 on this whole list. The first week the game's out, everyone's gonna have a thumbnail with Metagross in it. Because me too. I really love Metagross. It's really, really good. It's way better in Dynamax format than it is in regular formats. That being said, it's still really good. It gets Clear Body. This thing's been good for years and years and years and years. Back in the day, we used to run this thing in 2013. We used to run Lumberry Metagross, and you'd go Sunday, and you would side swagger your Metagross, give it a +2 boost, Lumberry that away, and then Metagross would just win the game with Earthquakes, Bullet Punches, Meteor Mashes, what have you. Metagross is just a really, really good mon. It's really chonky. I'm excited to use this guy. I think he's going to be a good mon to like help check Iron Hands as well, because Iron Hands, yeah, like you can Drain Punch me, but it just doesn't really do that much, and then we hit you for super effectives and headbutts, and I think this is going to be a good mon into like the Iron Hands meta. Issue is Metagross was amazing. And then Pokemon created a thing called Incineroar. Now, you can't intimidate Metagross, but both of Incineroar's stabs just melt the damn Metagross. So, it's going to be really hard to use Metagross. That being said, I would still like to put it up here in the OP category, but you're starting to see a pattern. The Pokemon that are up here, they did take so many resources away from your opponent where you have to respect those options. You can kind of like ignore Metagross or protect bait it. It's not really just going to win the game. Like if you ignore a Porygon and it gets a Trick Room, you lose. If you ignore a Smeargle, it puts something to sleep or sets up Speed Control, you lose. You ignore a Suicune, Speed Control, you lose. If you ignore a Metagross, you might take half damage on one of your mons. It's not really one-shotting anything. So that being said, it sucks to not put Metagross in the S tier because it's probably the coolest Pokemon coming out in the DLC. But it's going to have so many weaknesses to everything. Like, oh my gosh, it's going to have so many weaknesses to everything. Like, it's so hard. You know, it hurts me. It hurts me. But it's a cool mon. It gets like a 140 base attack stat too. It's 135. 80 130, 90 is good. Like, you're not, like, one-shotting the Metagross back in every single situation, but it's one of those mons that, like, it doesn't have enough damage, and a lot of the moves that Metagross uses, like, it has a 130 attack stat, 135, right? But, like, it's not using, like, close combats or, like, big, strong moves. It's using Meteor Mash, right? That's a 90, right? It's using Zen Headbutt. That's an 85, or 80, sorry. It's using Bullet Punch. So, and the moves that it does have that are kind of strong, like Earthquake, first of all, have to hit your teammate, and they're not stabbed, right? So you can have this massive attack stat, but you can't really do anything with it. I still think that, like, self-policy procking Metagross teams will see play, but, like, it's a little bit too fast to play in Trick Room. It's a little bit too slow to play in almost any other team that's built around Tailwind. It's a cool mon. I just don't think it's going to be like a meta definer like it has been in the past. It was one of the best mons in Dynamax format because you could go Max Steel Spike to give it and its teammate a defense boost, or Max Quake to give you and your teammate a Spadef boost, while also having that huge boost to the HP, being able to max out these fat defenses, and then, like, play around with the weakness policy. It was great in those formats, and even in formats before that, it had, like, mega forms that were more aggressive and good. It's still a good Pokemon, it's just not, like, as meta-defining. These guys, the Craniados, another example of Pokemon that's much better in singles. This thing only really gets one set. I don't even know what this thing's called. Head Smash Mon. Just throw up Head Smash and just see what gets it. Here we go. I thought it was Craniados. I think that's the evolution. Rampardos, they're the same thing. So it gets Mold Breaker and Sheer Force. They're both solid. I'd say a lot of people, you can use either of these. But the thing that this guy does is Head Smash. Stab Head Smash, and then from there, look at that stat, 165. You usually just throw full speed and throw a Scarf on this guy. I think that's the only set you're ever going to see play with. That being said, that's a pretty decent nuke, but it's still not great. I'm just being honest with you guys. It's just not great. It's like, I don't really think there's anything else you can do. Tyrantrum is like that and just a little bit better because it has a little bit more bulk and better defensive typing, but this guy gets like Rock Slide, which you compare with like Sheer Force. It gets Earthquake if you want to put it with the Mold Breaker set, but it just doesn't really get that many other things. Being a solo rock type means it doesn't really get those other secondary stabs as well. I think it gets access to things like, does it even get Dragon Dance? I'm just curious. No, see, it's not a dragon, right? So it just doesn't really, it doesn't have it. It gets, I'm pretty sure it gets like Brock Polish if you want to play something like that, but I still don't think it's going to be that viable. In singles, it's a lot better because you can pin something with a Head Smash that you would KO if you know you're faster than with your Scarf, and if they want to swap away, you know, they still die, but that is what it is. Bastiodon. I have a video on my channel featuring Bastiodon from like 2016, and that video still gets like 100 views every day. It's been 7 years, which is like, it's weird for a video that old to still get views like every single day. People just like looking up Bastiodon content. I like this Pokemon a lot. That being said, I don't think it's amazing. It's way too reactive to play in a lot of formats, and it's not that great versus Iron Hand specifically. But that being said, Sturdy's a good ability, so Soundproof in some situations, but Sturdy's the better one. It gets Metal Burst, which I think is really, really cool. But then from there, it gets access to like some decent moves, like Heavy Slam's cool. Roar is how I used to play it in the past. It gets Taunt, which a lot of people don't really expect on this thing because it is so slow, but it's great for taunting those Trick Room users, and then it gets like Wide Guard. So it's one of those mons that if you've never played against one, you'll be surprised that you can't kill it as easily as you would like, and you're like, damn, it's like taunting me on switch-ins, which means I can't protect, and so like, if you've ever played against one of these guys, you will know how to deal with it, but the first time everyone plays against one of these guys, they do end up messing up a little bit. It's a cool mon. Wide Guard, Taunt, Metal Burst, Heavy Slam, Rock Slide, things like that. It's pretty cool. That being said, I'd put it in mid. It has enough defensive options that can like change the way the game goes. Sturdy's an amazing ability. Like Sturdy Metal Burst just kind of means like, if you don't double into this Pokemon, I will one-shot something. Metal Burst is like a counter, and Metal Coat Fused, it functions at whatever your speed tier is. So if you're faster than them, you'll just use Metal Burst. It's not like Counter and Mirror Coat where you have to, it automatically goes second. But if you soak the damage and don't die, you apply back a 1.5 damage instead of a ×2 that Counter and Mirror Coat would be. So it's actually still a really, really good move. And it's one of the best mons to use it with because that built-in Sturdy. So you can then dedicate your item to being something like a Covert Cloak or like a Citrus Berry or a Leftovers and still have that like Focus Sash mechanic. It's actually pretty solid. Rhyperior is a really cool mon. I would like to compare Rhyperior to Metagross. Rhyperior and Metagross. These are two Pokemon that in Sword and Shield, they were very similar, right? Metagross 135, 130, Rhyperior 140, 130. But then from there, like Rhyperior has so much more HP. Yes, it has less Spadef, but then it also comes with like Lightning Rod and Solid Rock. Solid Rock's a great ability, being able to cut those super effective moves. I actually think Rhyperior is going to be meta. this is such a reach, right? But I think that this is going to be the Mon that gets slid onto those hard Trick Room teams. I think I like Rhyperior more than Ursaluna. Specifically because Terra. Rhyperior's big problem is, like, even with Solid Rock, if you hit it with a water move, or you hit it with, like, a grass move, it would still get 4 times super effective Dunzoed. But what we can do now is change its Terra, right, to be something that has, like, one weakness to, like, we can change it to normal. Which means you can only hit it with fighting attacks with super effective, which we also have Solid Rock and a massive defense, which means our Rhyperior just won't die, right? And we could AV it. We could still weakness policy proc. I think Rhyperior is actually going to be really, really, really good. Is it going to be on every single team top 8 everyone? No. But I do think that, like, you're going to be like, oh shit, I thought that would kill, and it doesn't. It just totally doesn't, especially when they tear it away. So that being said, I'm going to put Rhyperior in Great. I don't think it's going to be like OP meta-defining Great Busted, but I do think people are like, oh, dude, Terra makes that Pokemon good. And I really think that Rhyperior is going to see a lot more play in this format than it did towards like this tail end of Sword and Shield. Electivire is another Pokemon that's a lot better in singles. You know, let me know. Again, if you want to see that singles list, I'll go over it. But Electivire is kind of cool. It gets Motor Drive, which means if you get a hit with an electric attack, you're immune to it, and you get a +1 speed boost. So it's kind of like Voltazorb or Storm Drain, but it gives you those speed boosts instead. That being said, Electivire's biggest thing holding it back is the fact that it's actually slower than like an Electabuzz. I should probably just include Electabuzz on this list too, but like Electabuzz is just a little bit faster. And then also, it's stronger than Electabuzz, but it's still kind of weak because you still actually have to go Jolly to even still outspeed things after your +1. So it's like, you're still kind of weak. You have to. The set that I like to go on this guy is stuff like Protect, and then from there, you know, you have your Wild Charge, which is going to give Recoil. I don't think they gave it Close Combat. Yeah, see, they didn't. They gave it Cross Chop, right, which can super miss, and then like you have like Ice Punch here for coverage with like a Life Orb, and so like this whole set is like Recoil City. You could go like a Thunder Punch set with like Sash as well, but like there's so many mons that do this role. This is better than a lot of other things. It's a really cool mon. It's another mon that was much better in Dynamax format. But that being said, it just kind of, it's been power crept. It's like 15 years old. It just kind of isn't great, but it's better than not great. It's just in the mid category. It's just kind of okay. I think Electivire is kind of just okay. Magmortar, the equivalent of the Magmar evolution of that. Magmortar is not even nearly as good as Electivire. Yeah, it has a great special attack stat, but it's slower, and it's just fast enough to work in like a Tailwind if you had to, but why would you ever use a Magmortar over something like a Heatran? Like, look at these two. Look at these two. Magmortar has worse HP, worse defense, worse special attack, worse special defense, and barely faster speed. And it doesn't even get Earth Power. You got an Earthquake. So it's like, if you want to fight Heatran. It's just not a great mon. It's cool, but it's definitely not great category. This thing just doesn't get like any tools. I think the coolest thing that Magmortar gets is like Psychic. I think it gets like some weird fighting moves. I think it used to get Vacuum Wave even before they made that into a TM, but like it's probably going to get Vacuum Wave, but it just doesn't really do anything. I think Life Orb is also the common item that people like to play on that as well. Sometimes you see Scarf sets, but that being said, Magmortar is just fighting an uphill battle. So let's take a look at Porygon-Z, another Pokemon that used to be a lot better in Dynamax because you can do those max strikes for speed control. And you got like big and chunky through the use of like Dynamax. But Porygon-Z is a decent mon. Adaptability is good, download's good, analytics are all really good. I've had friends take this to Worlds in 2017. I've won tournaments with this Pokemon. Very, very solid. It can still get Trick Room. You can build it really bulky. Huge special attack stat. Adaptability gives you a double dip on all of your normal moves. And I think adaptability is going to work like for example, like let's say we wanted to use like Thunderbolt, and we would go like Electric Terra. Like the adaptability would let that hit even better. So like this Pokemon's gonna be pretty good. Same thing with the Porygon 2. I would definitely put it at least in the good category. I think the only thing holding Porygon-Z back from like being dominant, I think the most common item is gonna be like a Choice Scarf set. That's just my opinion. And it's 90, so it's fast enough to like you can still timid Choice Scarf this guy or modest Choice Scarf this guy and still outspeed things. It's 1 speed slower than Lando, which is kind of underwhelming. But you do outspeed a lot of stuff, and you can still OHKO a lot of different things. Porygon-Z is a really, really cool mon. It's very one-dimensional. It does lose pretty hard to like different forms of like redirection, fake outs, but it can become a Terra Hog and go Ghost Terra. There are situations in which Porygon-Z can just win you the game and like kind of solve for X in the back. Kind of like how it's like a special equivalent of like an Urshifu. You kind of save it and just like, this is a delete button. This is a delete button. You just check things. But I do think things like, you know, E-Speed users give it problems, Fake Out users give it problems, Redirection mons give it problems, and it's just kind of hard to use from there. But it's still a solid mon. I think Porygon-Z is good. It's a lot better in singles. We're getting close. We're getting close. We've done a lot of the list. I would say that like I'm being pretty stingy with these OP picks, but I still think I'm doing a pretty good job. Superior is up next. Superior. I think a lot of people are really excited for this guy. It gets contrary, which means anytime your stat would be lowered, it's raised instead. So when you are intimidated, instead of like lowering your stat and then giving you a +2 boost like Defiant would, you'd go just straight into attack boost, which is good. It can be both physical or special. A lot of people like to play this guy with Leaf Storm, right? And they say, when I use Leaf Storm, instead of getting that special attack drop, I get a +2 to my special attack. Now, the problem with that is Leaf Storm sucks, right? It can miss, first of all, and then your special attack stat is just not great. This Pokemon's okay. I think the best move this guy actually gets is Glare. Being able to 100% paralyze something, and you can do it against a lot of different mons. Really, really solid. It has a 113 base speed, which is good. This Pokemon is usable. But it does really struggle from the fact that, like, okay, you have your Contrary, you have your Glare for your speed control, you have your Leaf Storm, and then what do? You can't use Calm Mind because that would drop your stats, right? Because you have Contrary. Yeah, you can have Dragon Tail. You can go, like, Giga Drain. You can go with, like, a Terra Blast or, like, a Leech Seed. But you're trying to see, like, other than this, if they have, like, a Steel type, you're just like, oh, fuck, you know? You don't get access to, like, Earth Power, right? Yeah, so you don't get any other way to, like, hit those. So you'd have to, like, Offensive Terra, or maybe they give it, like, something else. But that being said, it's an okay mon. If I were to put it somewhere, I would definitely put it in, like, the mid category. I think that it's not good enough to be good. It's fast, right? But I just don't see it actually outvaluing things in, like, a format dominated by, like, Ruin Pokemon, Paradox Pokemon, with the speed control like Whimsicott brings to the table. This Pokemon doesn't actually provide enough value to its teammates in a double setting to, like, actually do anything. It's not prankster boosting anything. It's not redirecting anything. It's not fake out anything. It's trying to do something, and it's hoping that they're not doubling into your teammate or doubling into itself while you're trying to do it. So it's a definite, like, hog of resources in a doubles format, in my opinion. Emboar is kind of cool. Emboar is kind of cool. It's one of the only mons that gets this combo. So Blaze and Reckless, they're both solid. I'd say Reckless is better when you want to put it with Flare Blitz. The cool thing that Emboar gets is it's a fire type, right? It has, like, one of the coolest shinies ever seen in the history of the game, and it gets Scald because it does. And I actually think, like, Special Attacker Emboar being able to, like, wall out, like, so, like, this is the set that I like to use when I play Emboar. So you go with, like, a bunch of these options. So you go with, like, you got Focus Blast, you got Scald, you got Heat Wave, and then, like, your last move can be, like, a tech move or, you know, some sort of tech move, whatever you really want. It gets a bunch of other weird things. See, I gets, like, Solar Beam, you know, if I have it on, like, a Sun team, but, like, stuff like this. I think this is such a cool mon. I like Emboar. I've always been a fan. I really like its spread. It's kind of like Incineroar, right? Let's compare Emboar and Incineroar. So you compare Emboar and Incineroar. So Incineroar is 95, Emboar 110, much bigger. Incineroar 115, Emboar 123, bigger, right? So it's bigger there. Incineroar's like 25 base defense on it and Intimidate, which is amazing. And Emboar has more special attack. Incineroar has 25 more base defense, and yeah, Emboar's just a little bit faster. So, like, they're kind of very similar, but you can see Incineroar is, like, chonkier, just as strong, and it's Fake Out Intimidate, right? So it's like, and, like, Parting Shot. There's so many things that Incineroar does better than Emboar. But that being said, Emboar's fun. I'm doing it. You can't stop me. I like this Pokemon. I'm putting it in mid. I'm doing it. You're all gonna hate me. Like, this is the epitome of a not great Pokemon. I like Emboar. I think it's cool. I think it's a cool mon. I think people are not expecting its damage output, and I think a vested Emboar might have some value somewhere over the rainbow. Then I'm going to put it here. I'm just going to do it. Fire types are good. Fire types with Scald are even better. So that's where I'm going to put it. Blitzel? What is this thing called? What is this thing? It's the evolved form of Blitzel. What is it called? Zebstrika. Damn, look at me. Freaking into the memory banks for that one. It gets a Lightning Rod and Mold Breaker. Sorry, not Mold Breaker. Lightning Rod, Motor Drive, and Sap Super. These are all three amazing abilities. There's a player, Gary Kwan. He's used this and top cut like big events. He's taken it to big events. This Pokemon's not bad. 116 base speed is really, really good. Lightning Rod's a good ability. Sap Sipper's a good ability. It has a decent attack stat. It's its second highest stat. All three of these abilities are great. Motor Drive's still good. This thing's cool. It gets a bunch of really, really cool stuff. We have to compare it to physical. Like, I plan on using this in some situations, It gets like Wild Charge. You can go for the secondary, like a Fairy Terra double dip, like Terra Blast. It gets Flame Charge. I think it gets good moves. I think it's good enough moves on a good enough speed tier to like Life Orb or Sash it. It's not good enough to be good, but it's definitely better than Emboar. It gets good coverage. I think in past formats it's gotten Jump Kick, which is another good fighting coverage move. So I think it's a solid mon. I definitely don't hate it. It's very susceptible to Intimidate if you're playing a physical set. But that being said, like you can always just pivot out, play around that. It definitely like falls short compared to like most of the other mons up here. But 116 is a really, really underrated speed tier, so I would highly recommend at least checking this thing out. It's finally time for Excadrill. Yo, it is time for Sand to be good again. Make Sand good again. Excadrill is in the house. It gets Sand Rush and Sand Force and Mold Breaker for singles. This guy, Sand Rush, you double the speed stat. 88 is just fast enough, right? We were talking about like 80 is not enough. You need just a little bit more to still outspeed things. It gets access to Protect. It gets access to Rock Slide for them flinches. It gets access to Swords Dance if you want to use it. Access to that Stab Iron Head. Access to Earthquake. You can Sash it if you're fighting other Excadrills, or you can Life Orb it or Choice Band it. It's a really, really good mon. Excadrill's amazing. Any format, like, up until this point, we've had to use Lycanroc. These Pokemon are not comparable. Lycanroc and Excadrill, yeah, I guess Lycanroc's faster, but it ain't stronger, and it does not have better defensive typing. Excadrill's amazing. Excadrill is at least in the great tier for me. You know, similar to like Kingdra, it's the OG like weather abusers. You know, it's not that like, I want to talk about this. People are talking about like Polito came out in the Kitakami decks, right? And everyone was like, man, I really wish Polito was better. It's not that Polito's bad or that Pelipper's bad. It's that like the mons that they could be paired with weren't up to snuff yet. Like we didn't have Kingdra. It's the abusers that make weather good. Like T-Tar, I think, just won like Sacramento Regionals like a month ago. It'd be even better with an Excadrill. Like, T-Tar gets better because Excadrill exists. And so we're able to, like, flesh out the game just a little bit more by adding things like Excadrill. I think Excadrill's going to be great. I don't think it's, like, OP great. We've definitely moved past that. Things like Incineroar give Excadrill. It forces it into Earthquakes. You can Terastallize away. But Excadrill's good against Heatran, hands, a lot of those things. You can, obviously, don't want to eat the Drain Punch from the hands. But I do think Excadrill's very, very good. And I plan on using it a lot. I love Excadrill. You can just throw Excadrill and T-Tar on a team and just beat, like, players that aren't good enough. And so I'm a big fan of Excadrill. Really, really just good stat line. Whimsicott. The elephant in the room. Whimsicott is one of those mons that does break the game. It does. Let's plug in Prankster, which is Whimsicott's ability. And let's sort them by speed. So you can see, yeah, Tornadus gets Prankster Tailwind, which is really good. Whimsicott gets that, but faster. And so you can taunt those Tornaduses, and then you say those Tornaduses, they can just click Weak One, which that can miss, and then there's all 50-50s that go into that, and it's not great. Whimsicott invalidates almost every other Tailwind mon. So let's plug in Tailwind, and let's sort them by speed. Obviously, some of these are Megas because it's a Nadex form, but like Crobat, no, it's not in the Dex, but like not usable. Kilowatt, not usable. Ribombee, not usable. Noivern, not usable. These are fast mons that would normally be good if Prankster Tailwind didn't exist. It even, to some extent, disincentivizes Torn as well, because Whimsicott also checks Urshis and other stuff like that. Latias and Latios, not as easy to use. Iron Jugulus, which would normally be a really good Tailwind setter, but because Prankster Tailwind, nope. Same thing for Enamorus, same thing for like Scyther, Scizors, Zapdoses. You can use these things, but why would you? That's the thing. Salamence, like, they do get Tailwind. You can use them, but why would you? When I can just say Tailwind and have my teammate now just KO your teammate, right? If I were to put a Covert Cloak on this, even an open team sheet, you can't stop the Tailwind, because you also can't Prankster taunt me before, unless you're also using Whimsicott, right? Because it's the fastest Prankster Tailwind user, and fastest Prankster mon. So it's like, there's nothing that stops this. The only way to stop it is like Trick Room it, or like allow it to do its Tailwind thing, wait out, and then like re-Tailwind or trade Tailwinds. And then if you have like the right oppressive teammates, like an Iron Bundle or like an Urshifu or a Fluttermane, this Pokemon just rolls the game. It invalidates like 80% of the game and makes the game just like a herp derp 50-50 race to the finish. I hate this Pokemon in terms of like being a content creator, because like every single team I'm gonna have to play against for the next like year is gonna just be a Whimsicott all-in Tailwind team. And yeah, you like can beat those by slowing the game down, but like it makes every single game the same. It makes the game super boring. That being said, it's cracked. It's super busted. Like if there was a tier above OP, Whimsicott would be there all by itself. It's so freaking stupid how good this thing is. It also gets access to like Encore. It gets access to like Giga Drain, Energy Ball, all those other really cool moves. Access to like Sunny Days, all the things you would ever want. A Tailwind Abuser. It gets beat up to pair with Annihilate. Like this thing it gets every move in the game. It's the stupidest Pokemon ever. I actually think that this Pokemon, they should nerf it and take Tailwind from it. They really should. This Pokemon would still see play. I would still use it. A lot of people would still use it. It gets a lot of really cool moves. Because it's like Stun Spore. It still gets like Speed Control. It's just like, Tailwind on this thing is like so stupid. It makes every single game so boring. Like, everyone's like, I can't wait for Reg F. And it's like, you mean you can't wait for like Whimsicott Urshi with like a Spexmon and a Scarfmon behind it just to come out and roll you? That's what every game's going to be. You know, Whimsicott is just basically going to enable the teams that we already have now to like continue to dominate because like it's just a better Torn. That being said, I really think they should just take Tailwind from it and it would still see play. But yeah, it's top of the list. Whimsicott's stupid. Whimsicott's stupid busted. And yeah, you can KO the Whimsicott. Like I can be like, well, Incineroar can just Flare Blitz it. And it's like true. But then like, if let's take a look at a board state. I have Whimsicott and Teammate, and you have Incineroar and Teammate. And if I go Tailwind and have Whimsicott's Teammate KO your teammate, and then I lose my Whimsicott to your Incin, now I have Tailwind up. You have 3 Mons, I have 3 Mons, but now I have 2 Mons with Tailwind up versus your Incin, who, if I bring out the right Mon, will check your Incin and have my other Mon just check your other one. And so, like, it's a race to the finish. The game's over in 2 or 3 turns. Yes, there are still things you can do about it, but you see how oppressive that is and how, like, not fun it is, in my opinion. Maybe you have a different one. Let me know. Because, like, this is one of those Mons that everyone's like, I can't wait for Whimsicott. But then you gotta realize, like, everyone else gets the same Whimsicott. You're not the only one that's gonna be, like, prankster Tailwinding Encoring. It's gonna be rough. It's gonna be a rough format with Whimsicott. Let's hope they change it. Scrafty. I took Scrafty, a team built around Scrafty, to my very first in-person regionals, and that I got top 32 in. Scrafty's a cool mon. I like Scrafty. I personally like Scrafty more than Hitmontop. I think Dark Typing is very good in a lot of formats. Yes, it's weak to Fairy, 4 times weak to Fairy. Obviously, that's a thing. But you also are immune to Psychic, so it's better against things like Goth, better against things like Roselia and stuff like that. Obviously, you get the big Intimidate here. You get Fake Out, you get Drain Punch. Obviously, it also comes like a fighting weakness, so it's not as good as like it used to be in previous formats. Like, I get that. Scrafty's Time in the Sun is gone. It gets access to, like, Ice Punch. It even gets like weird things like Head Smash and like Dragon Dance, another really cool move. So it's like a fusion between like Hitmontop and Iron Hands with like a little bit more like random other mons attached to it. It's a really, really cool mon. It has a decent speed tier. 58's good. 115 on each of those defenses is great. HP stats terrible. I like Scrafty a lot. I think it gets some really cool options. But that being said, like, at the end of the day, it's kind of just more of like a niche pick, more of like a comfort pick. I would say Scrafty could maybe slot into the good stat, but I don't even think it's as good as Hitmontop. So I'm going to... Scrafty's too good for mid, though. Scrafty's too good for mid. Fake Out, Intimidate, too good for mid. It's good against Incineroar. That's it. It's really good against Incineroar because it stops both of Incineroar's... Well, it doesn't stop Fire Blitz, but it doesn't care. So I'm gonna put it in good. But if this were ranked, it'd be near the bottom of good. So I'm going to put it in good. I still like Scrafty. Minccino. This thing's much better in singles. It's Chinchino in this one. I've been calling other unevolved forms. This thing gets Technician and Skilling, both really, really good abilities. Honestly, Skilling's probably just better. And then from there, it gets like all the multi-hit moves. It gets like Rock Blast. It gets like Bullet Seed. It gets like Tail Slap. Right? So these are all different things. Like some people like to build it with like a King's Rock. That's probably the best that it can do is like just go for like flinch strats. I don't even think it gets like Fake Out, does it? That doesn't even get Fake Out, right? So that's basically what this thing does. It's not great. It has an above average speed tier. 115 is great, but like I'd rather run something like an Alolan Persian if it was just me running a Pokemon kind of like this. So that being said, I think it's better than not great, but like not really. I'm going to put it in not great. Maybe someone will change my mind. I don't really think it gets anything worth writing home about because it's still a night. If you throw one Intimidate on this thing, it's just absolute garbage. If you don't get the flinch, you're way overexposed. You don't really kill anything either. You're trying to flinch things. Like, you could just use a Fake Out mon. Like, you could have Fake Out and, like, Fling. You could use, like, a Raichu, right? You could use a Raichu and have, like, Fake Out. Not Facade. You can just go Fake Out and still have the King's Rock, which is your set, right? And just go Fling, right? And, like, this is better than one of those Minchinos is. So, it's a cool mon. It's way better in singles because they can't... if they pivot away from it, they take too much damage and have to take more Stealth Rocks damage. But in VGC, it's just kind of one-dimensional and not really fast enough. Reuniclus was so good back in like 2011. I really liked this mon. I used it a lot in 2013 as well. God, that was like a decade ago. I like Reuniclus. I think it was better in Dynamax format too. But that being said, it's cool. It gets Overcoat, so it's like immune to like Sandstorm damage and Powder Move. So like this is a good check to Amoonguss. It has that 30 base speed. It can be brought on Trick Room teams. This is a good Trick Room closer. That being said, there are still better Trick Room closers, but like in a meta dominated like by hands and by like a bunch of other mons, this thing's actually really good. It also gets Magic Guard, which means it can only take damage from direct attacks, which means like secondary effects, kind of like that Life Orb thing. If you were to Life Orb it, you don't take the recoil. So like people like to go like Protect, Trick Room, right? And then like if it does get Expanding Force, it'll run like Expanding Force if they're running like Entities and stuff like that. And then from there, like maybe like Dazzling. It doesn't get Dazzling Gloom. So yeah, does it get Dark Pulse? See, man, this guy doesn't get any cool moves anymore. Not that it ever even got those. I don't think it did. What else does this guy get? It gets like one other move. It's Energy Ball. Yeah. So this was a set people used to run back in the day, or just Psychic over the Expanding Force. But yeah, that's kind of what people run on it. I think it's a good mon. I definitely think it's a mid mon. It's a decent Trick Room mon, but I think we're gonna get so many better options that like, you know, it's just kind of, it's going to fall short. It has a great base HP too, right? Yeah, it has a good base HP with like decent defenses with a great special attack stat, but I think it's just a good example of power creep. This mon's like almost 15 years old, so it's like the meta's just kind of moved on a little bit. But Overcoat on is very nice on sand teams. It's a good pivot into T-Tar if you're afraid of like fighting attacks where you still don't want to take damage. It's a good pivot from Amoonguss, so you can swap in on Amoonguss' Spore, block the Spore with an Overcoat, and then from there repin the Amoonguss with like a Psychic. It's a good mon. Galvantula, another mon that's way better in singles than it is in doubles, being able to set those sticky webs. That being said, Galvantula is kind of cool. It gets Compound Eyes, which I like a lot, so you can go for those big thunders. Swarm's okay on a Sash set. But yeah, this guy basically, it gets Electro Web in some situations, which is good. Sticky Web is fine, but you don't really see that in VGC because it only works on Switch In. That being said, it does get like those higher accuracy thunders. Bug Buzz is not terrible. I think if this guy actually sees play in VGC, it's probably going to actually be built with like a Covert Cloak. Just so you can guarantee go for like some faster versions of these moves. That being said, other moves that it gets, it does get access to Energy Ball. It does get access to, there's one of them, it gets like Sucker Punch awkwardly enough. Volt Switch is another solid option on it. But that being said, I just don't really think this thing's going to be that great. I'm going to put it in the mid category because it has a above average speed tier and good. Electric Bug is like a unique enough typing to where, and it gets like enough tech moves to where like on a Sash or Covert Cloak set, this guy will be able to come in and do like something that not many other mons can do. It's a good disruptor for things that are like for example, if Crest comes back and becomes like huge, that Stab Bug Buzz could actually be like really viable, and you set things up correctly, you might be able to do a lot more damage than someone's really expecting. It has enough tech options, I think, to be in the mid category. What is this? Golurk, huh? All right. Golurk. So this guy gets No Guard, which is what a lot of people use on him. And he doesn't get any Oko moves or anything, but what he does get is Dynamic Punch, which is how this guy's always been run, kind of like a weird Machamp. But the issue with this guy is he doesn't stab the Dynamic Punch. So yeah, he gets the confusion. It does good damage, 124 base attack, but it just doesn't do any damage really. And then like the rest of his moves, very similar to like Metagross, like it's sort of like physical. It probably gets Poltergeist now. I wouldn't be surprised if it does, right? Yeah, it gets Poltergeist now. But before that, look at all these other moves. They're like weak. He does like Shadow Punch, you know, Stomping Tantrums, things like that. Rock Slides, high horsepower. They're just not very strong. Poltergeist is good on this guy. Does it even get Shadow Sneak? No. See, it's like, it just doesn't really get that many moves, and it doesn't really have that much speed control. It does get one really cool move people always forget about, and that's Fly for some reason, because like in the movies, it like sucked in its feet and made them into like cannons and like Iron Giant it around. So it's a cool mon. It's cool. But that being said, I think the only viable thing this guy gets, honestly, is, speaking about Lycanroc here, when you have like, it's similar to like Lycanroc in that it gets No Guard. There are situations in which you can take its No Guard and like skill swap it away. So, like let's talk about another Pokemon on this list. I think it's Meowscarada, not Meowscarada. What's that Pokemon? Prankster Cat. What are you called? Not Liepard. oh, what is this thing's called? Meowstic. There it is. So this thing gets like skill swap. So you can like skill swap away the Prankster from this guy, get this guy to have no guard, and then let this thing go down, and then bring out something that does have an OHKO move, like a Landorus or whatever, and then skill swap the no guard onto the Landorus, and then go for like the Fisher, right? While also being able to apply like double intimidates when you're doing that. You know, so stuff like that. It's just more Mons getting that. I think the only other Mon in the meta that had that was Lycanroc Dusk. So now that we have other Mons that aren't Lycanroc Dusk, maybe we'll be able to use more strats like this. I think Roleplay is another move. I don't know if this thing's still going to get it, but like Roleplay, user replaces its ability with the target, so you're just able to take the no guard from them and still have it on their Mon if you need be. So that way you know, and the reason why Meowstic's really good with this is because it's still like a fast Mon, so you can just use it as a teammate. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Golurk is not great. All that we're talking more about Meowstic. Hey, Meowstic's right there. Let's just talk about Meowstic right now. I think Meowstic's really cool. Meowstic gets Prankster, obviously. It gets access to like a faster speed stat. It's one of the faster Prankster users. It gets Trick Room, but it doesn't get to just use priority Trick Room. What Prankster does is it increases your priority by 1. Trick Room's like a -7. People think that like Prankster Trick Room is just going to be able to set Trick Room immediately. That doesn't work like that. The thing that this guy gets is like dual screens. It's like this is what people used before Grimmsnarl. And like I think Grimmsnarl is just a better version of this thing. What cool thing this guy gets also as well is like Fake Out. Like this is a Grimmsnarl, but worse. But it does get access to like those skill swaps, role plays, and things like that. It gets access to Trick Room. It gets access to like Sub, some other Thunderwave. Thunderwave's definitely been seen play on this guy before. Yawn. So there are things this guy does get. I don't think Meowstic's terrible. I would definitely put Meowstic in the good category. You have to respect Prankster Mons. The whole game is like built off their existence, I think, especially because they changed the way like dynamic speed control works with like speed tiers changing the second they get hit by a move that changes the speed, as opposed to like going to effect at the start of the next turn, which is how it used to be back before Sword and Shield. So that being said, Meowstic's still really good. I would still respect it. I think Grimmsnarl's better. I think there are just a lot of like solid Mons that do a little bit better job, but that being said, it's still viable. Incineroar gives it a really hard time though. We're on a Terrakion. Terrakion. One of my favorites. I think way better in singles as well, but it's good in VGC. So Terrakion gets a lot of really cool options. Justified. It's the main Justified Mon that you're ever going to see play, and you basically just use Beat Up with a side teammate. You know, the best Mon that gets that. Let's sort it by Beat Up. They took Beat Up away from Pult. So Pult's not the fast guy anymore, but Whimsicott still gets it, and so you can just Beat Up. So you go Tail 1 with Whimsicott, Protect Terrakion, and the next turn, Beat Up. And Beat Up is going to hit your Terrakion 4 times and give it a +4 attack boost, and then Terrakion's going to click a Stab Rock Slide, and you're going to win the game. Are you happy? You did it. It gets close combat. It gets access to like Quick Guard if you want to be able to protect your Whimsicott or you know, your Terrakion from like Fake Outs or priority moves like Grassy Glides and stuff like that. Aqua Jets. Also gets access to like Earthquake, just a bunch of other really good moves. Iron Head has been used in previous formats. I've used Roar. Sacred Sword's good if you want to get the stat drops. Gets Taunt. Terrakion's great. 108 base speed's amazing. 129's great. I think Terrakion's an amazing, amazing Pokemon. Very, very excited for this guy to come back. It sucks that like Whimsicott's the big player here, but I'm going to put Terrakion in the great category. I think Terrakion's very, very good. It's probably one of my favorite Sash users of all time. I think it's still better in singles than it is in VGC, but I do think Terrakion's really, really, really good. It's one of those mons that has to be sashed, but it has like the attack and the speed to where you can build it Adamant or Jolly and still get value out of it, and then like your opponent really has to respect it. It's kind of like an Excadrill, but you don't need sand. It's just kind of like ready to just go mess shit up. So it's a really, really cool mon, and I'm excited to use it. Virizion is not as impactful as Terrakion, but there have been formats where Virizion was very good. Virizion is really, really cool in a couple formats, specifically because it does a good job about disincentivizing Urshifu, but it's another justified mon. But from there, believe it or not, it has like a good special attack stat. You can build it physical or special, but it's actually better built physical, in my opinion. So there you go, like Protect. It gets Leaf Blade for that good coverage. You would go with like a Stone Edge if there's ever a meta that's dominated by like Talonflames, or previously it was like Charizard and Charizard Y. It was a great check to that. And then from there, your last move would be like a Close Combat or something. This is really, really good coverage here, and people would Life Orb it. So it's kind of like Terrakion. It's a little bit weaker, but if everyone is using Terrakion, this is the mon that checks it because you hit the Terrakion for super effective damage with the Leaf Blade, right? So it's a good mon. It's like an anti-meta Terrakion. It's a little bit bulkier. And again, you can also run it special if you wanted to. But I would say if Terrakion is in the great category, Virizion would just be good. It's not as strong at all compared to Tracheon. This thing has a 90 base attack. Tracheon has like a 120 something. So while they're, while they're the same base speed of 108, Tracheon has like way more offensive capabilities, and Tracheon's usually built Sash. You have to surround this guy with something else, but Virizion kind of makes up with that with the Life Orb as well, so it's like, there were times when Virizion has been like used in the past, but like I think it's another one that's just a lot better in that Dynamax format. And even in other formats, like where other mounts, like, you know, Charizard Y, 4 times weakness to Rock, able to Stone Edge those things. Good stuff. All right, Malamar. Now, I like Malamar. I think Malamar is cool. Malamar is another Contrary Mon. Contrary. So, plug in this. So, like, Enamorus gets Contrary, Superior gets it, Malamar gets it. So, Malamar also gets access to that superpower. You're able to just not really be hit by Intimidate and get those attack boosts. And what's cool about Malamar is it gets Trick Room. I've almost taken this thing to like 10 regionals, and I always back out at the last minute, and then when I get to the event, I'm like, why didn't I just bring a damn Malamar? It's so good. Like, you have Citrus Berry. Like, this thing is going to actually see some play in this format. I think like Psycho Cut's still good on it. You can put like 3 or 4 other moves here. There's like 3 or 4 other like really, really good things that it gets. Knockoff is a really good one. So like all of these are just like really, really solid. Dark Psychic's great. So you have your dual stabs here. Like, this is a good Mon. It is. It is a good Mon. It gets that Trick Room. It gets that Citrus Berry, so if you have the right teammates, you meet, so it's hard to double up into this guy if you're on like an Entity to be able to block those priority moves. And then from there, like the superpowers, they hit hard, they give you those defense and the attack boost. Psycho Cut breaks hands, Knockoff breaks most other things because it's stabbed. It's a really, really good Mon. That being said, is it up here? It's not. It's asking a lot to put Malamar in good. But you know what? I think that I'm going to put it there because I think that I could make Malamar really good. And it's one of those Mons that like no one builds for, ever. No one has like checks for Malamar. And when like it hits at the right time, they're like, oh, you mean I can't intimidate it? It one-shots all my Mons. I can't roll it over. I have to double up into it, and I can't do that through redirection. It's like, oh my gosh, like why is this thing so good? And it just kind of works. Incineroar. So I think a lot of people are expecting me to say like Incineroar best Mon. Every single YouTuber has to say Incineroar is the best. I don't like Incineroar very much. That being said, it's good. Obviously, it can go in the S tier. That's completely fine. It gets Fake Out. It gets Parting Shot. Intimidate. Good coverage. I don't know if they're going to give it Knockoff. But like Incineroar is a good Mon. It's a good Mon. I've won tournaments with this thing before it had Intimidate. In like Sun and Moon, I was winning like Premier Challenges with this thing just like having Blaze. Like Fake Out. Plus, it didn't even have a Parting Shot either. I ran it with Assault Vest. I had Fake Out. I had U-Turn. I had Darkest Lariat, which is another really good move that only Incineroar gets, I think, in this gen. And then Flare Blitz, right? That was just good enough. Like, that, it doesn't even need the other options. Intimidate's one of the best abilities in the game. It gets access now. You don't really use U-Turn. You use Parting Shot, so you can then drop their stats and then be able to come out and use more Fake Outs. And a lot of people don't even use Darkest Lariat anymore. Sometimes people want to put other moves on this thing. They put like, Taunt. They put like so many other things. Some people put Snarl here, just to not be able to punch up if they don't want to. It's just a really, really good Mon. You can use so many different things. It has a great attack stat, great bulk. Incineroar is like a Mon that can just be thrown onto any team. You can AV it, you can Citrus it, you can put safety goggles on it. It's like Arcanine like 2.0 in a lot of situations. It's kind of replaced Arcanine in a lot of teams. It's the bread or the butter that holds the sandwich together. So it's just a really, really good Mon. Again, these aren't ranked in their own tier. Obviously, Incineroar would probably be something, I'd say something like this is where I'm thinking this tier would look. Like, obviously, Whimsicott. I think Whimsicott's going to be better than Incineroar. But, yeah, Incineroar Dark type is really good, too, being able to be immune to those prankster, like, Encores and things like that. So, Incineroar is just an absolutely amazing Mon. Again, it's just kind of boring. It's kind of like Iron Hands. I don't really like Iron Hands either. I was talking a little about Incineroar. I like to use Entei instead of Incineroar just because it does the same job, but at a little bit faster speed tier, a little bit flashier. I think Sacred Fire is a really cool move, and yeah, Incineroar is just one of those Mons, like, I could use it, but I personally derive more enjoyment out of using other Mons instead. But you can just put Incineroar on any team. Alright, this is your reminder to leave a like on this video if you haven't yet. I think I got a text message. I'm going to check it. Nope, I didn't. Alright, well, leave a like on the video. Answer the question of the day. Drop a sub if you haven't. I do these mostly in one shot, so, you know, going all in. Primarina is the next Mon we're going to take a look at. And Primarina is actually really cool. So Primarina, it gets, it's Water Fairy, it gets Liquid Voice, which is a really, really cool move, which means all of its sound type moves, what is it? like right here. The Pokemon sound-based moves become water types. So like Hyper Voice is now a water Hyper Voice. Really, really cool. It also makes it so like when you use like, I think it gets like Perish Song, right? Doesn't it? Yeah, it gets Perish Song. If you have like a Gastrodon on the board, like it doesn't work. Like a Water Absorb Perish Song, like stuff like that. It's weird. But yeah, Hyper Voice is the move people use here. And they also pair it with like Moonblast and Dazzling. Primarina was better in Dynamax format, in my opinion. It was a good mon to bring in to slow the game down and have like a closer and Trick Room with a lot of AoE options. But that being said, great special attack, good HP. Defense stat is a little bit underwhelming, but you can pair that with an Intimidate user. And then great Speed Def and a slow enough speed stat to be able to use in Trick Room. This Pokemon's biggest issue, I think, is Iron Hands. But it has like a decent match against Iron Hands if you can hit them first. Moonblast does a lot. So this Pokemon will see play. The Pokemon that a lot of people like to compare it to is Azumarill, right? Because they're both fairy waters. But then Azumarill also gets like that Sap Sipper. So I think these are two very comparable Pokemon. And like the fact that we're not seeing a lot of Incineroar, which means we might not see a lot of Primarina. Primarina is also pretty good into Urshifu, but it struggles against like Rillaboom. That being said, I still think this Pokemon can see a lot of play competitively. I would say the highest that I would probably put it though is good. I think that it's asking a lot to even put it up here because like I really think it's so reactive that like it's just rough to put it somewhere. But like you can put like a Throat Spray on it, pair it with Hyper Voice. I wouldn't say that it's like better than a Blood Moon or like better than a lot of the other mons that already do that same type of mechanic, like a Sylveon. I would say Sylveon's probably better than Primarina. But like water typing's good. Liquid Voice is good. It gets a bunch of good tech options. It gets like life. Does it get life too? It gets some other like cool moves. It gets Perish Song. Like there are things it gets. It gets Flip Turns. People have used that before. It's allowed to be up here, but it's just one of those mons that it's like you're really all in playing with a Primarina. It's not the defensive pivot that like a Tapu Fini would be. So that's just my opinion on it. I'd rather use Tapu Fini. So we're down to Toucannon. Now I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Toucannon is the Pokemon that I am most excited about coming back in the DLC. 100%. Most excited. I like Toucannon. I don't like a lot of Pokemon. I don't. I like some. I like the way some look. I like the way some play. I like Toucannon. Toucannon's cool. Is Toucannon good? Toucannon's not good. I just like it a lot. It's one of my personal favorites. He's like an angry toucan. He doesn't get much cooler than that. He's just an angry toucan guy. Usually these guys get built with Sheer Force or Skill Link. Skill Link, it does get access to like Bullet Seed and all those other moves like that. I like the Sheer Force just a little bit better. It gets an exclusive move called Beak Blast. It burns, so it basically like charges up, and if they hit you while you're Beak Blasting, they'll get burned. And then you hit him with the Beak Blast. It's cool, but you just don't really use it. I think the best thing this guy gets, right, is it gets Tailwind. I like to go Tailwind. I like to go Citrus. Super standard, like just 80 base HP is good. 120 base attack is great, but you're not really ever, you're going to just get intimidated, so it doesn't matter. It has decent stats. So if you have like Tailwind, Protect, you can like Drill Peck or maybe like one other move that you can actually utilize to get a Sheer Force boost. It's kind of just a chonky Tailwind setter that people don't have calcs for. That's what I like it. That's what I like about Toucannon. It's a chonky Tailwind setter that people don't have as much calcs for, that Citrus Berry disincentivizes a double up. And I've used the term double up so many times. It makes it so they can't just like send two mons into that one. And you might be able to live that because you proc the Citrus Berry if you correctly like Terra or mitigate the damage. So that being said, where would I put it? It's in the not great. Even though I like this guy, I'm being honest with you guys. There's no secret sauce that Toucannon gets that makes it like busted. It's just kind of like, it's just like Noctowl. Like I like Noctowl too, and Braviary, like a Sui Braviary, but the best thing about them is that like they're kind of chonky and they get Tailwind. And those, they lose to Fake Out, they lose to Taunts, they lose to other opposing things Tailwinding and KOing me before I can set my Tailwind. Like, it's all not great, but Toucannon's fun. We're going to use a crap ton of it. I like the mon a lot. Spider Arachnoquid, very, very cool mon. This thing's actually a good mon. It gets Water Absorb, Water Bubble. I like the Water Bubble. So Pokemon's water power is ×2 and it can't be burned, and fire power against it is halved. It's such a good ability. One of the best abilities like in the game. And it gets like, I mean, Water Bubble makes all its moves hits. Like that's not that strong, but like 132 base Spadef, 68 HP on a 132 Spadef is actually good. 92 defense is great. It's slow enough to work in Trick Room. It gets access to like Liquidate. It gets access to like different bug moves. It gets access to like Lunge. It gets access to like Poison Jab. It also gets access to things like Wide Guard, which is like really, really underrated. I think this Pokemon's great. You can kind of splash this. You don't even need to play on Trick Room. It can just be splashed on a lot of different teams, and it's a good mon to like block Urshis. You can Trust as a way to not lose the Torns. I would definitely put this thing at least in the good category, but you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it more, it's probably going to go into great. It can hang with things like Shempow. It can hang with things like Chi-Yu. Hang with things like Flutter. Good against Urshi. This Pokemon might even bump up a little bit more. You might see a lot of this thing. Watch out for it. It's a good mon. You're not going to Oko it, right? You're not going to Oko it. You won't die. It resists ground. It resists fighting. It resists fire, water, grass. So grass is neutral. It's a good mon. People are going to be sleeping on this guy. It's going to be a good one. Comfey. I like Comfey a lot. Comfey might be one of my favorite like mechanical Pokemon. It was really good in Dynamax format because you could then use its Triage, which is healing moves have their priority increased by 3. So what that means, 3 priorities different than just like a Prankster. It makes it so if I'm 100 base speed and I were to use like a Draining Kiss to side Draining Kiss my teammate to activate a weakness policy, and let's say you had something like a Rillaboom, and you would like to Fake Out me, which is a +3 priority move, well, the fact that you're an 85 base speed and I'm a 100 means that I still get to do my move before you Fake Out me or my teammate. Really, really good stuff. So I can always get that Draining Kiss off. I can also always get a, so like Floral Healing, 50% heal to my teammate. This is amazing. It also gets things like Trick Room, and in previous formats, it got access to things like Ally Switch, right? This Pokemon's nuts. It can be able with like Mental Orb, Citrus Berry, Rocky Helmet, Focus Sash. Good stats. It also boosts like Leech Seed. Really, really good mon. I love this thing. I can put this thing on like every single team and just be a happy camper. You can basically just like, this Pokemon enables you to have like a carry mon, like a mon that's just like super thick with a bunch of different stat boosts, and then just like get all those boosts and then bring out the Comfey and just do Floral Healing on it until they have to start taking out the Comfey. And even if they do, you're weaving in Ally Switches, Protects, whatever's. It's so good. I love this Pokemon. I think Comfey is great. Yeah, Comfey is great. I don't think it's S tier, because like the meta's not as set up for it yet. But like, if you want to proc policies, this is the way you do it. This is the way you do it. You Terastallize into something that's weak against Fairy, get that policy proc, take about 10-15%, and just blow things up. Good stuff. I think Comfey is going to be a definitely usable mon. I'm definitely excited to use it. Minior. I bet you a lot of you guys that are watching this video have never actually played with Minior. I think the last time it was even in the game was in Ultra Sun and Moon. I don't think it's been in the game since then. If it has, I've never seen one. But Minior is a unique Pokemon. It gets an ability called Shield Down. So if Minior ends turn, it changes to a core, blah, blah, blah. It's really weird. If it has less than half HP, how do I word this? It starts off in like a shield up form, but if it's at less than half, it becomes like this form. And this form has like all the stats. 120, 100, 100, and it gets Shell Smash. Right? And he gets like Sash. This is what you do with this Pokemon. And then like from there, you can be physical or special. It gets Dazzling Gleam, it gets Rock Slide, it gets Explosions. It's just one of those weird mons. Power Gem, like it gets all this stuff. I haven't played with one of these in like a million years, it feels like. A Minior illion years. But yeah, I think this Pokemon's fun to play with, but it's very similar to like a Cloyster, right? It's just basically a Cloyster. They both get Shell Smash, they do the things, they do all the damage. It's sashed. So that being said, it's mid at best. I think the best that you're going to get out of it is people don't really understand how the matchup works. It's going to be a good partner for like redirectors. It's not necessarily a good partner for like Indeedee because it's flying. So it's going to be able to still get Fake Out. You have to Terastallize it away to still make that work. But that being said, I think redirection with this guy is good. Like a Moongus Minior might be something they could see play. It has good damaging options. It's just like most people can see that stuff coming a mile away. Alcremie is another Pokemon that I really like. We were talking a little bit about Comfey being able to enable teammates. If you want to play like a healer or like a Cleric Mon, the best thing we've had in this format so far is something like a Cresselia, right? Cresselia can go for like the Lunar Blessings, right? Being able to heal your statuses and restore your HP. It can also go for things like Helping Hand and get like speed control with things like Trick Room, right? That being said, Alcremie is a Pokemon that does a similar job. The bigger and better like a partner Pokemon you can have, like it was really good next to Dynamax Mons because like Sweet Veil would make it so you can't fall asleep, and Royal Veil would make it so you couldn't get taunted, or like Encore. Those are both solid abilities. And then from there, it would go for Decorate, which would give you a +2 boost to your attack and special attack. So like a Helping Hand that was more than Helping Hand and stuck for subsequent turns. Really, really good mon. Alcremie is like really cool. It gets like Recover. It gets good special attack options itself. It's had its own G-Max form. This is a great Pokemon. This is a really, really fun Pokemon. I think a lot of people are happy to have this one back because like it facilitates like playing a bulky like carry play style. Not necessarily stall. They're very different, but it can like facilitate people that want to like set up one Pokemon and like combo based teams. Like Alcremie is like the perfect mon to like weave into that sort of stuff. So that being said, I would definitely at least put it mid. I'm going to put it in good. I think this is one of those mons, the further down the format goes, the more you're going to see this Pokemon like creep into like top cuts, because like you can't really one-shot it. And the thing about Alcremie is you got to get it off the board before it sticks multiple decorates, because it just snowballs the game from there. And it's just really, really fun to see. And it has like a bunch of different forms and stuff like that. I think Alcremie is really good, but like taking a look at its stats once again, when this thing hits you with a D-Gleam or like a Mystical Fire, you feel it. It hurts. It has a great Spit Def. You can build it Sash. You can build it also like aggressive, like 64 base speed with like a full speed set. Does outspeed things in like a Tailwind, right? They're gonna get outsped. So it's like you might be able to just pop their Shempows in the face. You never know. It's a cool mon. I think Alcremie is viable for sure. Duraludon. We're going to talk about this Duraludon. I could probably make a whole video talking about the other Duraludon, the Arc Duraludon. But let's just talk about regular Duraludon because it's viable. Duraludon's good. You know, a lot of people like to run this guy with Stalwart, so it ignores redirection, right? But the thing is, like, even though you can ignore redirection, the thing, like, we were talking a little bit about this, like, what are you using redirection with in this format? It's to set up Trick Room. You can't one-shot a Porygon with anything. So the fact this guy ignores redirection isn't really as important as it was back in like Scarlet and Violet. Because remember, you used to like, sorry, Sword and Shield, where you would Dynamax your Duraludon, you would one-shot their mon and ignore the redirection. Duraludon just doesn't have that much damage in this format. So Stalwart's cool, but it's just not that great. I would say the best set that this guy has, obviously everyone's going to be like, Eviolite. You can go Eviolite, and then it'll make it like chunkier on the defense and Spidef side, and you still like die to Flutter Mane, and that's fine. But that's what people are talking about it. I actually think this guy's best set is Choice Scarf. And this is saying this as someone who's used Choice Scarf Duraludon in multiple like Premier Challenge tournaments, multiple like I used it in like 2 or 3. I think I've qualified for every Players Cup with Choice Scarf Duraludon because it can do like 3 or 4 different things. It gets Flash Cannon, right? It's a good move. It gets Draco Meteor, good move again. It gets access to like Dark Pulse, which could flinch things or do good damage against potential Psychic Mons. And then you would put Bulldoze here. Bulldoze. What was the move that it used? Was it Breaking Swipe? Yeah. Or no. Does it still get that? It wasn't. I mean, it does get Breaking Swipe. What was that? Brutal Swing. That's what it was. There we go. A Brutal Swing's not in the game anymore, is it? Oh, dude, see, Duraludon's nerfed. Brutal Swing was the move that you used. And then you use it to like Policy Proc your teammate, while also still respecting those options. That being said, now what would you use? Was it Get Bulldoze? No. I mean, I don't even know what I want to do with this guy now. He's much better in singles, I think, with like Eviolite. But that being said, like, Pokemon's okay. I think the Arc Duraludon is going to be better. But this guy has enough speed to technically function on a Scarf and like Revenge KO things or KO things where they're not going to see it coming. So like, if you're playing it on ladder and you have like a Duraludon, you can like hit that Shempow before they actually know what's going on. That being said, I just don't really think this guy's going to see that much play. Yeah, the Eviolite set might see some play, but there are going to be better Eviolite users running around. So where would I put this thing? It's definitely mid, because I feel it's like just a decent enough mon. Steel Dragon's an amazing typing, so even though you're really weak on the spit up side, you have enough chunk on the physical side and some great defensive typing to like balance it out. Same typing as Dialga. Alolan Exeggutor. It does all the same things that like regular Exeggutor does, but it's the only, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the only dragon type in the game that gets Trick Room. Trick Room. Yep, other than Dialga, right? And the legendaries. It's only not, yeah, there are legendaries that get it, but like it's the only dragon that's not a legendary that gets Trick Room. So I mean that's good, right? So it's like it gets Trick Room, it gets Frisk, which is good on ladder, but on like best of 3 open team sheet, just like I would go Citrus Berry with like Harvest. It's a really, really good Citrus Berry mon, so it gets access to like Trick Room. And then the other cool thing about this is like Grass Dragon makes you like not just get melted by like a bunch of the common things that are good in Psy Spam cores. So I think it's just really, really good defensive typing, great special attack stat, decent attack stat. Yeah, it's just a solid mon. It can be built physical, it can be built special, gets good coverage, gets some cool moves, gets some restoration moves. I think it still gets like, it still gets Sleep Powder. It might get like Leech Seed and stuff. Yeah, I think it's a cool mon. This thing is definitely like usable. And a lot of people don't really have calcs for like Trick Room setters like this. They're like, yo, I'm going to blow something up. And then they run into something like this and they're like, I can't double AoE down that thing. And then you're just fine. So it's definitely mid. I'm going to put in good. I think it's a really, really underrated mon. Better than regular Exeggutor in my opinion. People are not really respecting how like chonky this thing really is. 95 base HP is great, especially when you pair it with like Intimidate or Screens or like Redirection. Like they can't just break this thing. If you have like a Indie as a redirector, put like a Citrus Berry on this stat line, they can't break you if you tear it correctly. So you're always going to get the Trick Room up. Trick Room's going to be good in this format if you haven't realized. Cobalion. Cobalion's not as good as Terrakion and Virizion in my opinion. Cobalion, so it gets that 108 base speed, but it has like the same 90 base attack as Virizion, but then it doesn't have like that grass coverage that Virizion had. So against other things like Terrakion or Virizion, it actually has a steel weakness, so it's weaker. And then like because it's steel fighting, it's neutral to fairy, so it's just not as good. It's a cool mon. It gets that stab iron head, but it's really susceptible to intimidate. And there are situations where like it would see play in previous formats like Sword and Shield, and that's because when you had it with what was the flying move that it got? It had a flying move. It was Bounce back in Sword and Shield. This would turn into Max Airstream, and that's just not viable in this format. So that's the only thing that set it apart from like Terrakion. But that just doesn't work to give you a speed boost anymore. So like Terrakion was way better in terms. Sorry, Cobalion was way better with Dynamax, and it's just not in this format. I think the best you could make it work is like mid. It has good stats for mid. It's a legendary, right? It should just go there, right? It has 108, 129, 90, 90 with 90 base HP. It's solid mon. It's a good check to Incineroar in some situations because like, you know, you can swap in on the Darkest Lariat if you're conditioning like a Darkest Lariat or like a Snarl, get the Justified proc, and then repin with like a big Sacred Sword or Close Combat. So it's a good, it's usable. It's just not as good as Terrakion or Virizion. And then we have some Ubers, right? We're going to put the Ubers in the Uber tier. Maybe let me know in the comments if you want to see me do a video ranking all of like the restricted legendary Pokemon for those specific formats. But like realistically, Ubers are going to be in their own format, and that we're probably going to be using those Ubers, which are basically cover legendaries and other busted Pokemon like that, probably at the end of Regulation F, which is going to end in like April. So these are going to be all these like the Dustmanes, Necrozmas, Solgaleos, Kyurem forms with like Groudons and Kyogres. We have Latios and Latias, and those guys aren't cover legendaries, so we're going to rank them. But they actually get some really cool tools. I think Latias is better than Latios in this format specifically. But let's rank both. We have Latias, and remember, there's no Megas involved. All right, so we got Latias and Latios. Latios is the more aggressive form, so it gets a little bit more special attack versus Latios. Sorry, Latias gets a little bit more Spadef. And so the reason why I think Latias is better, first of all, there's a great defensive type, Dragon Psychic, really, really good at blocking. Like, it's really putting your Dragon typing to work, being able to mitigate the damage to, like, water, you know, fire, grass, all those things. It's a really good defensive core. Very similar to, like, Suicune. It's a Tailwind setter that does not have to take those rocks damage. And so it's a really, really solid mon. It gets access to like recovery moves as well. From there, it goes for like Calm Minds. It goes for Dragon Pulse. It's just kind of hard to get off the board. It also did get access to, I think, like the Brutal Swings and Bulldoze. It still gets both. So you can use this to like policy proc a Metagross and have that Earthquake and then have avoid the damage from the Metagross. So that was another core that people used back in the day. Latios, on the other hand, still can get Tailwind, but it's built more like aggressive with like Life Orb, Scarf, Specs, Sash. And you just deal like big damage with like, you know, access to like Draco Meteor. You have like Draco Meteor. You go access to like things like Psychic. And then it does actually still get things like Ice Beam and stuff like that. If you want to like cover Landos and other grass types and things like that, it gets like Mystical Fire too, I think. So it's a cool mon. The base 110 is a good enough speed. I would say that I would put Latias in Great. Because I think Latias is it's a good mon for Tailwind. It's one of the few mons. There's not that many that can just go manual Tailwind setters and still have viable. Because like Suicune and Latias can like soak the damage correctly. And I would put Latios in good. Because it's like really, really solid defensive typing. And here we go. This is our list. That's the list so far. So let me know what you think about this list, and let me know in the comments if you guys made it this far. If you want to see the same list for singles as well from like a battle stadium or like a 6v6 mindset, let me know in the comments which one you want to see. If that's something that's at all interesting to you. I think that this format is going to be very, very aggressive. So like you're either going to see like a lot of Whimsicott like win the game in 3 turns teams, or you're going to see like hard Trick Room where they get up the Trick Room because you can't really stop it unless you're using Imprison, and then the Trick Room team wins the game before the Trick Room runs out. That's what I'm thinking the meta is going to look like. I don't think we're going to see the long, stally meta that kind of like Reg E can be when Torn Urshi don't just blow one of the teams open. You know, I feel like Reg E does have the potential to be like very balanced with like Hands, Amoonguss, Heatran, weaving in and like restoring health, pinning things, and playing a little bit of a longer game. I don't think we're going to see that in Reg F just because we have so many more tools to facilitate like hyper aggressive play, but that's just my opinion. And again, I just want to say I'm going to be at San Antonio Regional, so think about checking out the San Antonio Regional stream. I just might get on it. You never really know. And if you guys have any questions or videos you want to see, from the DLC. I'll be back on Monday. So think about letting me know what sort of stuff you want to see in the comments. And other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out. I'll see you guys next time.